Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our May 16th meeting of the Board of Supervisors, and we're going to do a roll call first.
Okay, good morning. Chair Madrone. We'll call you first.
Present.
Supervisor Arroyo. Here. Supervisor Wilson.
Presente.
Supervisor Bohn. And Supervisor Bushnell.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good
All
morning.
right. And if you'll please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Wow, we've got a full crowd today. Welcome, everybody. So let's see if we have any modifications to the agenda. CAO Hayes.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, Chair. We do have a few modifications. Item K1 is the adjournment. However, we are going to take public comment and hear that matter right before consent, as there are family and friends in the audience. Item D1 is being pulled from consent and will return at a later date. And item D2 is being pulled for discussion. However, we do have a number of time set items today. So for logistics planning, we'll hear that matter after the closed session time set at 11:30.
Great. Thank you very much for those modifications. And so what we're going to do is go ahead and start out with our closing in memory of certificate for Richard Evans. And Supervisor Arroyo, would you like to present this, please?
It would be my honor. So I know we have a few folks here to speak on this item. So I just wanted to acknowledge, I didn't think I was going to suddenly be emotional. The passing of Richard Evans, who was a mover and shaker throughout Humboldt County. I learned so much about him more recently, but I had the pleasure of knowing him as a board member of Redwood Community Action Agency, a neighborhood activist and mover and shaker in the west side of Eureka. And now I know more about his legacy in southern Humboldt. So Richard was so unique, so positive, dynamic, always joyful. We had some great conversations with some very interesting mugs that some people who've been in his home may know about. Just colorful, artistic, beautiful home, and conversations about like really getting to the heart of things and the community's needs and the way that he believed in acceptance so deeply. So I wanted to give the floor to those who knew him even much better than I. I just know he was a bright light for many years in my life and the lives of many here in Eureka and throughout the county. So Heidi, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Supervisor Arroyo. On behalf of the Board of Westside Community Improvement and the neighbors on the west side, I'm absolutely sure that Richard would be thrilled with the recognition today. We were a great team. He was a steady force behind my driving force, and many times when the wind stopped blowing, he would run the rudder and I would turn the oars. He's going to be sorely missed in the neighborhood, but his spirit and his lessons remain. Thank you for the recognition today.
Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Val Martinez. I'm the Executive Director of Redwood Community Action Agency. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about a wonderful man this morning. Well, I met Richard when he joined the RCA Board of Directors in 2010. At that time, his heart was set on developing the abandoned Jefferson School and converting it into a community center along with Heidi and many other community members. His enthusiasm was contagious, and soon thereafter, RCA was committed to the cause. The two organizations worked together, secured funding, and made it a reality. The Jefferson Community Center and Park are a tribute to his vision, perseverance, and creativity of the West Side community members and the WCIA board. Richard was a valued and committed member of the RCA board who, despite his declining health, maintained his participation in the meetings. His keen intellect, gift for conversation, and endearing personality made for lively meetings. Richard was truly an authentic, kind, and loving person. He touched my heart simply by being himself. He was truly a remarkable man that enriched the world while working to improve it. On behalf of the Board of Directors of RCAA and staff, we bid Richard farewell as he heads off to his new adventures. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please present.
Definitely. Definitely, Heidi. Appreciate it.
And this is a good chance for us to applaud, to thank Richard for his service. Thank you for being here today. And with that, we're going to jump into our consent agenda. And we have a large one. And
Chair,
yes,
sorry
please.
to interrupt. If we could just
Public
get,
comment, excuse me.
well, no, on the adjournment, if we could just get a motion to authorize the signature on the certificate, and to adjourn the meeting at the end of the day, not right now.
Yes, so do we have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah.
Moved by Supervisor Arroyo and seconded by Supervisor Wilson, and we should take public comment. I go to Zoom first, and there are no hands up in Zoom, so I'll go to those in the audience here today. Would anybody like to come up and speak on this particular item? This is your opportunity. Seeing no movement in the chambers, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion in front of us, but there was no,
So there
there is a
wasn't
hand
one,
up.
yeah,
I'll
and
go
then
ahead and
keeps
take it.
going up and hanging.
We've
Okay.
got 3358. This is your opportunity to speak on this agenda item, our adjournment item. And no, we are not adjourning right now. So *6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Hi, this is Sonny Anderson.
Welcome, Sonny.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I wanted to address the board. And I live in Petrolia, as you know. and
Sonny,
the road
Sonny,
issue I'm addressing.
excuse me, Sonny, this item is on the adjournment item we just did in honor of Mr. Evans. Is that what you're here to speak about?
Oh, I was just non-agenda item.
Okay, that'll be coming up after consent. Thank you, Sonny. So watch for that after the consent items. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the vote. Do we have the tabs up?
We
Yep,
did
there we
have
go.
tabs up. Do you see yours?
Yes. You guys good? Okay. You're good? Yep,
Sometimes when I go to speaker after starting the vote, it
no worries.
disappears, so I'll do a roll call vote.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Arroyo,
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson,
With gratitude, yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes,
Supervisor Bushnell,
Yes.
and Supervisor Bohn. Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
great, thank you, Nikki. Okay, now we will go to our consent agenda. And we have a number of proclamations we're going to go through and letters of appreciation and such, so bear with us on that. The first one I have that I wanted to check with Supervisor Bohn, the National Association of Letter Carriers Food Drive Day. Did you want to mention something on that, please?
Well, since we didn't have our meeting last week, the letter carrier day was on Saturday. I hope everybody participated. I was out and noticed quite a few trucks out, and they were doing their thing. They usually collect about 80,000 pounds, which is 2 truck and trailer loads of stuff. So kudos to the public for being generous, and kudos to our letter carriers for doing all the collection and everything else for food bank. So anyway, that was nothing to read actually because it's in the past.
Thank you, Supervisor Bohn. And next we have May is Mental Health Month, proclamation by Supervisor Bushnell.
Is anybody here for Mental Health Month to receive? Come up. You could come up to the podium if you'd like. So thank you. I'm going to also recognize that Supervisor Arroyo wanted to bring this forward, and so I'm going to go ahead and read this. A proclamation of the Board of Supervisors of Humboldt County. Whereas May is Mental Health Awareness Month, a time to create greater public awareness about mental health and change attitudes about mental illness, promote wellness and recovery, and reduce stigma and discrimination. And whereas according to NAMI, California, mental illness is one of the most common health conditions in the state, affecting 1 out of 5 adults and 1 out of 6 children aged 16 to 17, impacting both the person experiencing mental health challenges and those who care about and love them. And whereas compared to the state, Humboldt County faces statistically higher rates of suicide, addiction, and homelessness, which are all potential negative outcomes of unrelated mental illness. And whereas 1 out of every 24 Californians with a serious mental illness has difficulty functioning in everyday life, and if left untreated has a life expectancy 25 years shorter than the general population, according to the California Healthcare Foundation. And whereas every day millions of people face stigma related to mental illness and addiction and may feel isolated and alone, going years before receiving any help. And whereas Humboldt County recognizes the importance of social determinants of health and their impacts on mental health, and strive to reduce disparity in health outcomes for communities of color and other groups, and whereas recovery can and does happen, and all Humboldt County residents should know that support and help is available regardless of an individual's situation. And whereas creating a community where everyone feels comfortable reaching out for the support they deserve is crucial to ending stigma and achieving health equity around mental health, mental illness, and addiction. And whereas access to Humboldt achieving health equality and ending stigma of paramount importance to Humboldt County. And whereas there are many organizations, including the Department of Health and Human Services, nonprofits, and private agencies, as well as faith-based and government programs whose staff work tirelessly to provide treatment options and improve the lives of Humboldt County residents and the families of those affected by mental illness and addiction. Now, therefore, may it be resolved that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims May 2023 as Mental Health Awareness Month in Humboldt County and calls upon the community, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools in the county to commit to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, the steps citizens can take to promote their own mental health, and the need for appropriate and accessible services for all people within mental health and addiction needs. That was a very big mouthful. So thank you for being here today. Mental health, whether you think it affects you as a person or not, most of the time, most likely you have someone in your family that has experienced a mental health crisis. My mom died at 49. That's the 25 years of less life expectancy from mental illness and homelessness when I was too young to recognize and to try to get her the help that she needed. Also, having someone, mental health is not easily treatable because it's not always recognized by the person. And so I really appreciate all the work that this county does and the people that are committed to it. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Natalie, want to go down? Oh, sure.
I'm wearing my green. It's not exactly lime green.
That's okay.
Close enough.
Okay, and then you guys can take a picture.
Good afternoon. My name is Stacy Farmer. I am a Peer Coach 3 at the Transition Age Youth Division, known as TAY. We serve youth who are 16 to 26, and we are so thankful that Humboldt County has decided to acknowledge Mental Health Awareness Month. This is a really important month to me and the youth that I work with, because oftentimes they feel unheard, unseen, and unacknowledged, and don't want to enter into the community because of some of the barriers that they face. So this month gives us a great opportunity to do loud events that acknowledge their presence in our community, and not only theirs, but other members in the community who are suffering behind closed doors with this illness. Today we will do a walk for mental health awareness, and our youth have made signs with slogans that are important to them. And I just want to acknowledge that it does impact people whether they know it or not. And our community is suffering greatly with the change of things in the community and in the world. And as you drive through our town, it is hard to not acknowledge. And when those people leave the earth, whether they have conquered their mental health or not, when we don't see those people who are out there walking down the street, screaming, talking, maybe in the nude, it affects us. We wonder where they're at. So I want to encourage those who are out there or who are in here who are suffering to join us in letting our community know that they are not alone, and that it is not their fault, and that it is okay. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Also, I just want to recognize that green is the color for mental health awareness.
Yes.
And I like the green in your hair.
Thank you. It actually is, and I wanted to read what green is. Thank you. So green is the ribbon that you will see in colors people are wearing, and this color is associated with nature, health, growth, and prosperity. It is the color of life. Emotions that are related with green are harmony, growth, freshness, and energy. The effects of the color is relaxing, revitalizing, reassurance, and enhances cognition. The positive is prosperity, safe, hope, and balance.
Hi there, my name is Betty Garfield and I'm with the Hope Center. I'm the peer lead 3 there. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you guys all for presenting to the community that May is a very important time of year, that we all need to come together and support each other right now. So I think Stacy had most of what I was gonna say, so I'm not gonna repeat myself and let Jack go.
Thank you again. My name is Jack Brazil, Deputy Director for Behavioral Health, and I appreciate the board taking time to read the proclamation and really your support for this effort all year round. And we know that behavioral health serves a segment of the needs for behavioral health, but this is really a community effort, and we appreciate everybody who works in this field and provides services and treatment. And we certainly encourage those in our community who need help to seek that. And county behavioral health is always a good starting place, as there's no wrong door. And I just finally want to say, we're really excited at Behavioral Health with all of our new initiatives. Obviously, I was here a few weeks ago with AOT to talk about that, but we have, crisis residential for adults and children coming to our community. That's really going to be a good effort to keep our individuals, safe and in our county. And then we have the triage center that we're very hopeful about, and really looking forward to those efforts. And we know that a lot of that starts with the board's support, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And hang on a second. Yeah. So is that out on your presentation? Okay, let's give an applause for consideration. I think, we all, whether we admit it or not, struggle with mental health basically on a daily basis, especially in today's world. So very much appreciate your work in that arena and the Hope Center and all all the programs at HC Tacey and the rest of it. So thank you for your work. Yeah. Okay. What we're going to do is continue through all of our proclamations, and then we'll take comment on the consent agenda as a whole. At the end of that, we have several more proclamations. And so next, so Steve, we're going to go ahead and do that. So we've got a couple of retirement resolutions. One is for Colette Frugard, and the other, which does not appear to be on the agenda, but I certainly have it here, is for Diane Dara, and they're both with Child Support Services. They're both dated as May 16th, so I'm going to go ahead and read them both. Is there anyone here from Child Support Services today? Yeah, Mr. Bennett, come on up. And so the first one is for Colette Frugard, and it reads, whereas on September 23rd, 2002, Colette Frugard began her career with Child Support as a Legal Clerk 1, and whereas in September of 2023, Colette promoted to Legal Clerk 2, and on February 16, 2014, Colette promoted from Legal Clerk 2 to Child Support Assistant 2. And whereas on April 14, 2015, Colette achieved the rank of Child Support Assistant 3, in which she served as a lead and mentor to others on her team. And whereas in 2016, she attended the Leadership Academy and maintained the trainings necessary for her position as a recognized leader and trainer in our offices. And whereas from her first day to her last, Colette has shared her knowledge, patience, and generosity of spirit with all of those who work with her. And whereas after 21 years of loyalty and dedicated service to the County of Humboldt, Colette has decided to dedicate time to enjoying her family and life outside of the workplace. And whereas her coworkers have requested her continuous efforts be celebrated through though they hate to see her go, now therefore be it resolved that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors hereby recognizes, honors, and expresses gratitude to Colette M. Frugard for her decades of dedication to our community and our county, and wishes her a long and joyous retirement. And so I'll go ahead and read the second one, and we'll do those together. Is that okay?
Chair
Great.
Madrone?
Yes, please.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you confirm who the second one was for again?
Second one is for Diane Dara.
Is that on the agenda today?
It's not on the agenda, but I have it here. It was placed at my desk.
Yeah, I think it's got to be agendized.
Okay, no problem. So we'll just go ahead and do this one, and we'll do the other one next week then.
Sounds good.
And is Colette here today?
She's not here today.
Okay. And Deborah is not here, or Diane is not here either, hopefully. Good, okay. All right, yes, please.
Thank you so much, Chairman Madrone and Supervisors, for recognizing Colette today. There's so much I could say about her. I'll just be brief, though. The last few years, especially with the shortage that we've had of staff, her leadership has just been instrumental in our department. Her work ethic, her commitment to the department, to training employees, the leadership role she's taken over the last few years, we're really going to miss her. And most importantly, she's just a great person to work with. She just comes in every day with a positive attitude, very friendly, and she's a fantastic listener. We really wish her well. I'm very excited for her that she gets to spend this time with her family now and move on to the next chapter of her life, but we're really going to miss her. And thank you very much for this recognition today.
A little honoring for her, please. Okay, and the next one on our agenda, number 8, is proclaim May 2023 as CalFresh Awareness Month in Humboldt County. And we have a proclamation for that as well. Whereas the Humboldt County Department of Health and Human Services staff strives to ensure CalFresh benefits are accessible to all eligible Humboldt County residents and utilized to the fullest. And whereas CalFresh helps provide food security for more than 25,660 Humboldt County residents, including more than 7,070 children and 4,360 elderly community members. Whereas DHHS and community partners are working hard to make sure our most vulnerable populations have food on their tables and to get these benefits, out to eligible community members who are experiencing economic hardship. And whereas our local Humboldt County economy benefited from the more than $52 million, $400,000 in federal CalFresh funds that were spent on food by county residents in 2022. And whereas DHHS's social services branch staff has relationships with staff at community-based organizations and medical providers who help refer people to the CalFresh program and create an important link to these benefits for people experiencing food insecurity. And whereas CalFresh funding pays for the benefit assistance program and nutrition education through public health, funding local outreach programs, helping children access free and reduced cost school meals, supporting local farms through the Market Matched Farmers Market program, and supporting job placement through CalFresh employment and trainings, support to the Helping Humboldt Employment Empowerment Program. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaim May 2023 as CalFresh Awareness Month by honoring the work the CalFresh program accomplishes through community agencies and social services staff to alleviate food insecurity among Humboldt County residents, including individuals, families with children, and elderly and disabled people. So.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Board, for the proclamation for CalFresh Awareness Month. I would like to make an update as we received our final numbers for the year of 2022. In addition to the regular CalFresh, the $52 million, we also issued $31,508,229 for a total of $83,972,461 into our community with CalFresh funds.
Wow.
Thank you.
That is amazing. Thank you. And next?
I just wanted to use this quick moment to talk about the importance of CalFresh in our community. CalFresh Awareness Month is really about making people aware of this important program and how it helps our community meet its most basic needs. And on top of that, you know, CalFresh Awareness Month is about reducing stigma of these assistance programs. And I think it's important that people know that this brings millions of dollars into our community, and it supports local jobs, it supports local farms, and it supports our children, our adults, and making sure they have full bellies when they go to school and work. So I just wanted to also add, applying is easier than ever on benefitscal.com, and managing and maintaining your benefits is really simple. So go check it out and see if you're eligible today. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Board.
Thank you very much. And let's give a little applause for the staff of CalFresh. And Supervisor Bushnell would like to make a comment.
Before you guys leave, I really want to recognize that during the earthquake and the winter storms, that with the food loss that happened with all the electricity being out, that you guys, the department, worked super hard to help people get some extra funds on their CalFresh card to be able to get back in their homes and have food. I know that was a ton of work, and I seen you guys out there in Riadel, and also with the storms of December and January. So I really want to recognize that work and how fast you guys were able to accomplish that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, and next we have, I'm sorry, Supervisor Arroyo, you had a comment, please.
I just wanted to remind folks, I always try to promote this every opportunity that I get when we talk about CalFresh, that the Market Match program is a way to double the impact of those CalFresh dollars at our local farmers markets. And then there's also the opportunity to get starts as part of CalFresh. So I know my first 7 years living in Humboldt, I was eligible for CalFresh and grew a garden. And that's also an option that I don't think as many folks are aware about, is that they can get starts for food starts. So just wanted to share that as well.
Great, thank you very much. And next we have item number 7, a letter of appreciation to Glenn Sinistro for his service on the Fortuna Fire District Commission. Supervisor Bushnell, just want to make a quick comment.
Yeah, I just want to thank Glenn for his service to the Fortuna Commission and to the Fortuna District School. He was superintendent of Fortuna High. He's moved on to Cloverdale. We'll be moving at the end of this month, and to tell him congratulations and that, you know, he made a large impact in Fortuna. I don't remember, how long was he superintendent? Do you remember? About 13 years. So he worked with that school and that community for a long time, and that's a lot. You know, it's a lot of work being a superintendent of a high school. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And next we have item number 8, which is a resolution celebrating the Redwood Forest chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, 100th year anniversary. Supervisor Bohn. Wow, 100 years.
And they're still active as heck. And thanks for being here. This is the Redwood Forest Chapter Daughters of the American Revolution Centennial Celebration. Whereas the Redwood Forest Chapter, NSDAR, is an integral part of Humboldt County celebrating their 100-year anniversary. Whereas the Redwood Forest Chapter welcomes descendants of American patriots and celebrates the United States of America and its Constitution. And whereas the Redwood Forest Chapter was established the 17th day of May, 1923 in the city of Eureka, California, under the organizing regent, Mrs. Bertha Murray, whose family was early pioneers of Humboldt County. Whereas the chapter has 100 years of preserving history and serving our community with a multitude of projects and goals that highlighted historic preservation, education, and patriotism. Whereas the chapter has proudly preserved and maintained the original Fort Humboldt flag, which is now 170 years old. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors recognize the 100-year centennial celebration of the Redwood Forest Chapter Daughters of the American Revolution and invited the community to celebrate the many contributions made by this chapter. And if I'm not mistaken, I got this about 10 or 12 years ago from you guys, handed this out, and I've kept it in my drawer. I actually read it quite a bit. But it's the United States Constitution, what it says and what it means. Everybody should take a glance at it.
Yes, I agree.
Especially before they quote it.
That would be especially nice. We hand out those things. We hand out flag codes and flags, and we missed the Rhodey Parade where we usually hand out millions of flags, it seems like, because we had another event going on. But
there you go.
Was Jack Noble here when you did your 100-year? Oh, sorry.
I don't remember, because I wasn't here. However, Bertha Murray is my third cousin.
Is that related to Dayton? Is that related to Dayton, Murray Field and everything?
No,
oh, no. Oh. Okay.
I'd like to thank the supervisors, because the Daughters of the American Revolution, we are not always very visible, but we are there. It is a nonprofit, non-political, volunteer women's service organization dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and securing America's future through educating the children. So we supply a lot of that. The only thing that sets us really apart from a lot of other service organizations is that we are a lineal descent from a person who served in the American Revolution, one way or another, not necessarily all fighters. I mean, but some were, most of them. And we find ways to provide service to our communities. And we want to thank you for recognizing the service of our past 100 years, and we look forward to continuing doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and that's our proclamations and resolutions for the day. Are there any other questions, comments from anybody on the board in regards to the consent agenda? And seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Looking at the Zoom, I don't see any hands up for this particular item, which is the consent agenda. And if you do have any comment, please let us know which item on the consent agenda you're speaking on, and you'll have 3 minutes. We'll see if there's anybody here in the audience here today who would like to come up and speak on the consent agenda. Welcome. Please come on up, and you've got 3 minutes.
Okay.
You can pull the mic down, and there you go.
Okay. My name is Elaine Weinreb, and I would like to discuss items number 16, Professional Services Agreement with Community Care on POM LLC, regarding the provision of long-term residential skilled nursing and mental health treatment services. This sounds like a return to the bad old days when people with mental illnesses were pulled out of their community and locked up in some so-called hospital far away from their homes, where they had nobody to look out for their welfare and were cut off from family, friends, and community. This proposal, however, is even worse, because not only does it deal with people with mental illnesses, but also people with, quote, chronic physical illnesses, unquote, who are in need of skilled nursing services. This happened a few years back to a friend of mine who ended up in a local nursing home for what was supposed to be a temporary stay for a physical problem that had nothing to do with her mental health, which was fine, by the way. They transferred her without her consent from one out-of-town nursing home to another, and she ended up dying alone, hundreds of miles from her friends. She had no immediate family that had the ability to care for her, but she did not deserve that kind of isolation, dislocation, and loneliness. This could happen to any one of us: a broken hip, a stroke, an accident, a long recovery period from an operation. And unless you have a family caregiver or an exceptionally strong network of friends, you could find yourself isolated in Riverside, 11 hours away from Eureka. I urge the supervisors not to approve this outrageous plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And anyone else on consent agenda, please come forward and let us know which item you're speaking on, please.
Our Humboldt County Chair Supervisor Steve Madrone, our Humboldt County Vice Chair Supervisor Rex Bohn, our Supervisor Michelle Bushnell, our Supervisor Mike Wilson, our Supervisor Natalie Arroyo, our support staff here and in the audience. I am Steve Davis, your idea man from Mactown, with an updated report of the serious challenges and success stories of our mental health needs and capabilities. My family is still suffering the loss of your first dentist in McKinleyville, my father, Ralph L. Davis, DDS, Captain Ralph of the USS LSI 1091 Museum ship. My mother has tried to step into his big shoes of managing the family finances, doing the taxes. It has not been easy for her or myself, with my sister having very challenged situations that was started before my father's passing, after my father's passing, and I just wanted to thank those folks that were here receiving your excellent worded mental health in month of May proclamation at the Hope Center and at the adult mental health crisis care, especially the transition as many people as we can to places like our Crestwood Bridge House and Pathways, and then the satellite houses that I'm hoping we can double the amount. And then reporting on Mother's Day a wonderful walk on the Hammond Trail where I have pictures of my sister enjoying the sunshine, the fresh air, the blue sky, the Mad River on a wonderful park bench. And I have pictures of myself in my pose with the overhanging wonderful trees. And so please support today and every day our best efforts on delivering food through our excellent post office carriers and the CalFresh people that should be recognized every hour along with our farmers. And let's make this year the very best year for mental health and healthfulness in our Humboldt County and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else on public comment on consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. And did we get a motion and a second? I don't think we did yet, so.
I would make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second. Motion by Supervisor Bushnell, second by Supervisor Wilson. And do we have vote tabs, or take a quick look here? Does everybody have one up?
Comment?
Yes, comment from Supervisor Bohn,
There was
please.
a comment on number 16, and I can tend to agree with you on some of that. I had a brother who was actually institutionalized at Napa State Hospital, and when they closed the Napa State Hospitals in '68, actually came back here, and at that time was put into a myriad of different housing, which I don't know was better or worse. At the end, it was better. Joanne treated him like her own and everything else, but sometimes it's the only hand we're dealt. So they're not on the street, so they do have some sort of services. Not all of us have that core family or core friends or great insurance that will allow us this. And what we're trying to do is help the people in the most respectful way and cost effective. And and there's not a lot of that around. So rather than have them suffer completely alone, we have to, the Department of Health and Human Services scans everywhere they can. They look at multiple homes and stuff like that. Is it perfect? No. Is it the hand we're dealt? Sometimes it is. So I hear what you're saying, and I applaud DHHS for at least finding some alternatives.
Thank you for that, Supervisor Bohn, and yeah, your comments were very much appreciated. So with that, do we have all the votes in? No?
Do you have your tab up, Okay.
I do.
We do now.
Okay.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a time set at 9:30, but it's not dependent on any outside staff or anything, so we're already a few minutes over. I'm going to go ahead and do public comment on non-agenda items, and then we'll jump into the time set at 9:30. Hope that doesn't throw everything else off for the day, but so public comment on non-agenda items. This is your opportunity to speak on those. I'm looking at the Zoom, and I do not see any. Oh, we do have one hand up, but first I have a question from Supervisor Bushnell.
No, I have a comment on non-agenda items.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind. I want to recognize Chris Gosma in the southern Humboldt area that turned 100 years old yesterday.
Yes.
And will be celebrating this Saturday. And so I want to wish her a very happy birthday. Her and her husband Louis were a huge part of she still is. Louis passed away of Southern Humboldt, and so it's just a really great thing to reach your 100th year. She's been waiting a while for this, so I want to recognize that. And then also she's been waiting 100 years. Always said I'm going to make it to be 100. And then also I wanted to recognize that yesterday, May 15th is observed as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and that was done in 1962. And I just really, a lot of peace officers lose their life in the line of duty, and I just really want to recognize that.
Great, thank you. And there was such a wonderful interview on KMUD last night, and I love the little part where she said they were the first family to get a color TV in Redway, and they had all kinds of children from the neighborhood there every Sunday evening to watch Walt Disney. And that certainly brings back memories for myself in that age group of the first color and that Disney show on Sunday night was just, that was the family event, right? So thank you for that, Supervisor Bushnell. Okay, we do have one hand up in Zoom, and that is 0116. This is your opportunity to comment. *6 to unmute. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, this is Ash Teeter again with the LostCoastPopulist.com. To say that we've yet to receive a reply on our email about the previous week's proclamation on hate speech. Has the county made any progress on tracking down the person responsible from the IP address we provided? It was likely near the Open Door Community Health Center. Also, I sent an email out to the board regarding the recent segregated graduation ceremony at now Cal Poly Humboldt, and just asking any of the board, if you, as political members of the community, if you support segregated graduations. Anyways, if you'd like to comment on that, go ahead. Also, we had in the state here, Newsom, he backed out of the reparations task force after looking at the price tag. Apparently, it's going to cost somewhere upwards of $8 billion when our total state budget is like $3 billion. And then another recent occurrence was Dave Chappelle was in San Francisco, and he called out the city as a disaster, said the city needed a Batman. And the Babylon Bee did a spoof statement on San Francisco as well, joked that they should employ monkeys to fling the poo off the sidewalks. And recently, Newsom talked about sending National Guard to San Francisco to deal with the fentanyl crisis, but a later report stated that they just never showed up. I guess he didn't follow through on that either. Then, Biden, he's falling back on his student loan forgiveness promise. I guess that was just another political, get some people elected kind of statement. They're going to kick back in 3 years. And then Biden's also readopting a Trump-era border policy with the asylum seeking, where they now people seeking asylum in this country have to do it in another country first. And this is kind of directly related to our state's fentanyl problem, because as many might know, the fentanyl
30 seconds.
comes over the border through the open border. Let's see. President Barack Obama and then President Joe Biden were personally briefed about the CIA Director John Brennan in 2016. There's evidence that Hillary Clinton was planning to falsely link the then presidential candidate Trump to Russia. So I guess that's coming out as all fake, according to John Durham here. But anyways, that's all for today.
Thank you very much. And for the public's information, we typically do not comment on comments from the public on non-agenda items because it's not agendized. So I do not see any of their hands up in Zoom. We'll go to those here in the audience today. If you would like to make a public comment on non-agenda items, please step forward. Welcome.
First and foremost, thank you, our chair, Supervisor Steve Madrone, for representing me in our northern Humboldt area. I have a very serious concern, and that is with the U-Haul organization that is trying to make available our former Kmart and our former Ray's, where they have these wonderful U-Haul hauling vehicles and storage units outside, but I need to move things from our family's estate, hopefully into the warm, dry space where it's beautifully done, but I can't figure out how to organize a hopeful charity and sale with our greater McKinleyville area. If you can make sure that all of the boxes have been checked and the people are organizing well so that I can continue building my group, hoping for a good tailgate sale, and then utilizing the inside areas or outside areas of this fine classic U-Haul organization. And Supervisor Michelle Bushnell, you've done excellent work for Rio Dell. Supervisor Rex Bohn, thank you so much for your excellent work that we can eliminate the blight, Supervisor Natalie Arroyo, in Eureka. As I'm coming in, those businesses that are closed down, you have those plywood over them. There's just a couple of them, and then all of a sudden it's back to world-class murals and every single person and their traveling houses. We have the resources. We can do better. And Supervisor Mike Wilson, your best efforts for our plaza and Blue Lake, where the businesses are there, it's just for our new businesses like Juju Bees and the price points of people that can help our students and our traveling nurses and everyone in the great city of Arcata, where this plaza has great potential if we just support our own with our well-earned dollars, investing again and again close to home, and as many around the world that can enjoy this high quality of life I celebrate here with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with comment on non-agenda items, please come forward. Welcome.
Good morning. I come today regarding homelessness, and I have a proposal. That is, if not a house, at least a home. What's the difference? As I have no formal title, education, or training from which to speak, I will quote Encyclopedia Britannica. The main difference between them is that house is concrete. House refers to a building in which someone lives. In contrast, a home can refer to either a building or to any location that a person thinks of as the place where she lives and that belongs to her. A home can be a house or an apartment, but it could also be a tent, a boat, or an underground cave. And that speaks to me because my grandfather was born in a dugout on the side of the hill. But back to Britannica. I quote, "A home can even be something abstract, a place in your mind when you say, 'Let's go home.' You are probably not talking simply about going to a physical structure you live. You are talking about being in the special place where you feel most comfortable that belongs to you. We all know that housing is in short supply. So I propose an interim approach to addressing homelessness. It would be a countywide system of shelter declaration campgrounds. Remember, you've passed a shelter declaration, as Humboldt County has, and it would be operated using Housing First approach. And that's the model of Housing First is your policy. It was adopted by resolution of the Board of Supervisors. It's defined in the Welfare and Institutions Code. Housing First means the evidence-based model that uses housing as a tool rather than a reward for recovery, that centers on providing or connecting homeless people to permanent housing. It offers services as needed and requested. It would also use the California Residential Code Appendix Emergency Housing. This was passed by implemented by Housing and Community Development Department.
30 seconds.
And they're now permanent, under which you can provide emergency housing in the form of campgrounds. And lastly, there would hopefully be an appointed oversight committee that would provide coordination and guidance. Thank you for those who are listening.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with public comment on non-agenda items? And seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board, and we're going to go into our 9:30 time set. Apologies for running late on that. And this is sponsored by Supervisor Arroyo, and I'm assuming you might want Director Ford to come forward and join us at the staff table here for this discussion. Great. Supervisor Arroyo, take it away.
Thank you very much. The purpose of agendizing this was, as the staff report says, to gauge interest in discussing this further and identifying possible next steps. So my understanding of this matter is that, and I'm sure Director Ford can expand significantly on this because I'm, obviously pretty new to this organization. But I understand that we're the only county in California that does not have development impact fees. And I also understand that these costs are not, they're not non-existent right now. We just apply them in a different process. So developers are not as clear up front in what the costs of their development what additional costs will be associated with development proposals, and those usually come in the form of conditions of approval or some other mechanism that I've seen from the outside be negotiated over a long period of time and result in a lot of uncertainty. So in talking with several, big developers interested in investing in the region, for example, they expressed interest in knowing what the costs would be upfront associated with their development and the community impact that it would have. And this is not intended to pay for existing maintenance or, backfill coffers of the county to deal with, issues not related to the development, but really to address the direct impacts of the development. So that's my interest in talking about it and pursuing this, and look forward to hearing the thoughts of Director Ford and others on the board.
Thank you. Director Ford?
Thank you, Chair Madrone. There is some truth to what actually a lot of truth to what Supervisor Arroyo is saying. And perhaps just a real life example would be helpful. And that has to do with the McKay subdivision. In that particular case, the EIR identified that there were traffic impacts that needed to be addressed. And ultimately decided that the fair share for that subdivision was to install 2 traffic lights. And that was later changed by the board to allow an alternative for non-vehicular related improvements. The way a traffic fee would work as applied to that is that the county would have done a nexus study to identify what the cumulative impacts are needed to implement the development allowed by the general plan, and then to identify fees to install those improvements, or identify a list of improvements that are needed to address those impacts, and then to identify fees associated with that to implement that. Then in that particular case, rather than the developer needing to install improvements as part of the subdivision improvements, they would be able to pay fees at the time of building permit. And there's an argument that it adds to the cost of the building permit. That is true, but it's going to get paid for at some point during the development process. And one of the things that would happen under that scenario is that if a developer came through and was willing to pay the traffic mitigation fees, typically the way I've seen it done in the past is that their cumulative environmental impacts then are deemed mitigated because they're complying with the mitigation program that the county or the jurisdiction has identified. And so payment of those fees would mitigate that impact. And so that would all be known up front. A developer would be able to calculate their costs up front. They would not have to go through an entire process to get through the EIR to understand what the fees are. Be happy to answer any questions about that.
Great, thank you. Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. What does it look like in rural areas for a developmental fee on a permit?
It would basically have to do with looking at, and it could be done by zones, by areas, be looking at what improvements are needed within that area to mitigate the impact, and then to identify what the likely number of projects are needed to support that. The downside, frankly, is that when your growth rate is slow and the amount of money coming in from fees isn't sufficient to fund the improvement, the struggle becomes then, if that money is held for, I think it's 7 years, it needs to be returned to the developer. So we could end up collecting fees, and if the growth rate wasn't fast enough to pay for the improvement, if no project were undertaken, the money gets returned.
Thank you for that. So in an unincorporated rural area such as southern Humboldt or Willow Creek area where a home would be built by, say, a private person, what would that look like to that? Would that still be in that permitting? So I'm going to reference to Director Mattson, who maybe could come up also. But in rural areas, the impacts are more to the rural roads, the increase in use in rural roads, and adding homes to those rural areas. And so I had spoken with Director Mattson earlier, about a month ago, about could that fee be applied to rural roads, for rural roads? Maybe Director Mattson could speak to that.
So development fees are usually applied where you need growth of the system, like an interchange, like additional bike lanes, et cetera. For the rural roads, it would be very difficult to develop that nexus simply because the traffic impacts are so low that the road is already built for that design. All the rural roads, I don't see develop. If there was a 2,500 unit development, that would be completely different. But what we see is singular developments here and there, and this would be more applicable to like the greater Eureka area. So if the city was moving forward with a development impact fee to join with them, so it would be consistent in the area with the developers between the city and the county. It's really not applied very much in the rural areas. That we just don't see that kind of growth that your more populous counties do, where they'll build a new town in the middle of nowhere with 10,000 people. That's not the kind of growth that we see.
Okay, thank you for those questions.
Yeah, and mentioning Willow Creek, some schools have development impact fees, but not all the school districts. I know that Trinity Valley Elementary does, because I've gotten calls from people wanting to build homes and we're surprised by it, but it is one of those upfront costs that they find out very quickly when they apply for a home. But it's there aren't very many school districts that actually have development impact fees. Is that correct? Only a few?
In Humboldt County, that is true.
Yeah, in Humboldt County. So, and like you said, roads are one of those issues, but schools, police services, fire services, there's lots of impacts, but one home at a time, no. It's that cumulative impact that starts triggering something at some point. But any other board members with any other? Yes, Supervisor Bohn and then Supervisor Wilson.
And I, does the city of Eureka have developer fees?
Eureka City Schools does, but the city of Eureka does not. It's similar to how we do it on a project by project basis, I would say. And so, one possibility could be to speak to other jurisdictions about their interest in implementing something similar, so that we're in lockstep.
And I did this last weekend, and and much like they run into the same thing, it's kind of like we have a recreation fund called Quinby Act funds, and we give the money back more than because we don't have a park system in there. John and I talked about that yesterday. I did talk to someone that is interested in trying to do the McKay Ranch, and his exact quote was, "Why don't you triple these fees?" So it gives me one more reason not to do it. So as these people, as we need to build housing, and I know apartments, and I know all that's great, but a lot of this Cal Poly stuff and a lot of the managers out there at the fish farm and things like that, they don't want to live in apartments. They want to live up in the country and maybe have just a little lot so their kids could actually play baseball out in the backyard and things like that. So as we move forward, this is for areas, and I just drove through Sacramento and Roseville and all these places that have them. They've got some tremendous growth, whereas the state itself is losing population. We're not gaining population, so we're not having to build to cover the influx of people. We're treading water with people. Our school system, and didn't Eureka City Schools just try to do their developer fees, and it kind of didn't happen because of input. And I worry because I actually called a few developers and people that build houses and provide housing for people and stuff. And they were pretty concerned about this because I don't know if anybody knows, but the Community Services District is doubling their rates over the next 5 years. Their hookup fees are going from approximately $5,000 to $15,000. There is no way, and developer fees do not apply to government projects, right? So all these housings that are going up, that will not apply to that, right?
So that would be correct, although they should be doing an environmental impact report or some kind of environmental assessment of the impacts associated with the development.
No, I fully understand, but we're building quite a few units that are government funded, which we won't get those fees off. That'll put a lot of people in one place. And and then the other thing is with yesterday's numbers, if we did a development fee, I see the average for the around say is like $478 is the number that kept coming up a square foot. And if we take our square footage of, let's say we're doing our 100 houses at 2,000 square feet, we're coming out just shy of $1 million. And I'm pretty sure if we're going to do an improvement, a light, an interchange, or anything else, that will just cover the design and to do something. I mean, I'm finding that out with a neighborhood that I thought was 100% behind a stoplight, and I'm finding out they don't want it, according to some people. So on F Street at 1.2, 1.3 estimate for traffic safety. So we would never be able to raise enough money for development fees to do that at approximately $1,000 to $2,000 a house. So it's kind of good, and I know things are kind of tough, and let's get it out of the, but the people that are building the houses probably can at least afford right now. They're not making a lot of money on every house if you talk to them. And the other thing is we'll see there are not a lot of new houses being built. And there's a reason for that. There's very few on the market. So I'm just saying, is this a time where we increase the pricing and increase the effort to put restrictions or when everything we talk about is affordable housing, but affordable housing is, the only reason it's affordable is because the taxpayers are building it. There's very few private sector building affordable housing. There's private building it with government dollars. So I think that's always going to be the rub on this. And I'm not saying this is a bad idea. It's something that should be looked at. But just like everything else, we come up with great ideas up here. But do we reach out enough and talk to the people that are actually going to be affected? The people that are going to be here tomorrow that are going to build houses into the future, because we're losing those. So I'm not against this. I don't think it's a great idea, but I'm not against it. But I'd like to see a focus group or a discussion amongst everybody, the people that have all, that think it's the greatest thing in the world, and then the actual people that actually have to put the rubber on the road. Because they're going to tell you that it's going to be. I watched the whole debacle, the argument at Eureka City Schools, and it got shot down pretty quick for the same reasons. They can't afford it. So if we could just, there's not much information in this idea, and I understand it's just to bring it out. So if it was me, I'd like to actually see that the people that are going to have to pay the fee, which is everybody but us, unless we're buying a new house, let's see what their input is and what they feel about it. Now, a lot of people are willing to pay for school fees and stuff because they want good, positive schooling for their children. But I think we're going to do a little more work than where we're at today.
Thank you. I've got Supervisor Wilson, and then Supervisor Arroyo, and then Supervisor Bushnell in the queue. Supervisor Arroyo. I'm sorry, Wilson, excuse me.
Thank you, through the chair. Briefly, I just say that I do support the continuance of this, of this item, but the continuance of this discussion, which is, looks at the resources. It isn't just, it is about the sort of the pain of paying upfront for infrastructure and services, but we also have to remember all the folks that live in the community on the ongoing basis that will use and utilize and require really the service and infrastructure associated with fees like this, and yeah, we're lacking in that space. So I would also add that recreational districts are really popular and have been for a long time, and there have been fees around that because they bring needed and really very popular infrastructure to communities and neighborhoods, and it actually is valuable to people's property values and public safety, and a lot of what we're talking about are infrastructures that really actually reduce costs overall in a community, and so it's not just about the upfront cost, it really is about the overall savings in the long run. I think it's worth a discussion, so happy to hear what we do with that.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you, and thank you, Supervisor Bohn, for saying that we need to do outreach around this, and I wholeheartedly agree. However, I didn't feel it was appropriate to start doing extensive outreach about something that our board hadn't weighed in on yet. So I see this as a very slow burn item. So I would want to know that the direction was at least to explore it before I start conducting a lot of discussions with people about what this could look like. So I see this as something that's a slow burn thing that would take quite a while to implement, because there would need to be a lot of underlying study and analysis, which is really well put in the staff report. We would need to really understand to what type of development this applies, and what kinds of improvements we'd be seeking to fund with the development impact fees. And I do concur with Director Mattson that this would likely be in the more populous areas of the county where there's likely to be significant development, which I will say I see things a little differently. I think we're likely to see quite a lot of development in the, particularly in the Humboldt Bay area in the coming years. And some of that will very likely be outside of, city limits. But it would be good to confer with our counterparts in the cities to understand what their appetite is for this. And, there's all kinds of, as Supervisor Wilson mentioned, there's parks and recreation facilities. There's, potentially other community services that can be funded. So I think traffic impacts are the most commonly thought about, or transportation impacts, but there are other possibilities as well. And, at least in talking with developers associated with some of the developments on the Samoa Peninsula, one of the things that they said was that there's a lot of uncertainty in how much their development is going to cost, and they would like there to be more clarity up front. So there is the possibility. I will say that the Eureka City School Board did approve this a year ago, 4-1. So they had a lot of discussion about it. They decided to revisit it in 6 months. I don't know what that 6-month revisiting looked like. So they decided to, did they decide to suspend it at that time? Okay, because it passed 4-1 and when it was initially proposed. So
I was at the meeting. They did pass it.
Mm-hmm.
We could pass it here, but the thing is, there was so much pushback from the developers. They just could not see it being implemented, because as a citizen of Eureka, we're already paying 2 school bonds.
Yeah.
And they get 66% of or 65% of our property tax.
Yeah.
So in turn, people are just saying they didn't want to, even the people that are hoping for better. So it was pretty well vet. I'm going off this argument, watching a revamp of what happened to them, and I see if we reach out. And I understand your part about not wanting to reach out to anybody else before you found out what the appetite of the board was. But I probably do it backwards, and I'm kind of simple. As I said, I reach out and says, hey, if I get the board to approve this, are you going to approve it? And they're going to go, no, let's have a fight. And I'm tired of fighting. I think what we need to do is what's best for everybody.
I think we might just see that process a little differently. Maybe I'm a little more, I don't know if cautious is the right word, but just I want to make sure that I'm representing the county's direction, when doing outreach. So anyway, I know this may come as a surprise to people that it's on the agenda, but I wanted to put it forward for a conversation here. And again, it would really be a lengthy process to determine what's appropriate. It wouldn't have to be the same proposal that Eureka City Schools was entertaining by any means. It could be completely different. So, I can understand how there were concerns about that in residential construction. So anyway,
Okay, thank you.
I think that's it.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you through the chair. So Director Ford, there are state fees that go along with subdivisions. Is there like $1,000 for open space or something?
It's Quimby fees for Parks and Recreation.
So I would like, if we bring this item back, I would like to see what state fees are already there, because I'm not familiar with those, and I'm not sure the whole board is, or the community, rural versus urban, if you could say that for this area, although we're all rural, but how it would interface or how it would work with the rural areas in Humboldt. And then also like Fortuna and Rio Del, they do other fees associated with their building permits, and different with commercial, different with residential, but maybe some comparison there to see how it works in those two communities. And, in the rural areas, Southern Humboldt especially, and Rio Del and Fortuna, we have school bonds, a lot of school bonds already, and that are attached onto the the land taxes. And so I would just like to have a full discussion of the pros and cons, because I think there's a lot, and our county is so different structured with Eureka, Fortuna, Ferndale, and the incorporated versus the rural. I wouldn't want it to be a deterrent to building homes, for sure.
Great, thank you for that. Supervisor Bohn.
And since Supervisor Arroyo and Supervisor Wilson both mentioned it, I would love to see more money go to Parks and Recreation. I've got a $3 million complex in the largest public park and rec area in the greater unincorporated Eureka area, and get no government assistance. All volunteers, valued at about $3.7 million. That quite a few, in excess of 700 games, practices, everything else. There's public tot lot that we just replaced at the cost of $100,000, and thank you for Kiwanis. So I've talked to John about there's some huge maintenance issues. I've gone to the state, and I guess that well's run dry because we're getting quite a few park money spent locally. So I would love to see monies available, both for private parks that are used for only public use. So that is a great buzzword, but I don't see it being the answer. I do like the idea that this is a slow burn. It's just kind of out there. Does anybody have an appetite for it? I think a lot of people are going to be on a diet when it comes to an appetite for this. So I just think we'll see bigger pushback with bigger awareness, with the idea of reaching out to a few people. Like I got one call, and then I called some other people to see what they thought. And again, like I said, it's easy for us to say, pay a little bit more, it won't hurt. But the idea of actually selling a house and being affordable housing and everything else, it just goes completely out the window through the private sector. We can keep buying it, but if we look at the state budget with a $32 billion deficit, they're not going to be throwing money around like they did, even though they need to.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. I had one last question, Director Ford. What does this look like for research for your department and staff load?
Yeah.
It is another assignment, and A lot of it depends on the board's action on the budget in terms of what our staffing is going to look like.
Thank you. I don't know how we can, I don't want you to spend a lot of time and then nothing come from it, and that's painful for your department. And so maybe that's a discussion we could have right now as well on how much, and this is, you know, time that you're spending that you can't bill for, which we've had a lot of discussions about lately, and, you know, affecting your budget. So I just don't know what that looks like either, and if we could include that in this discussion.
Yeah, on the agenda item, it says to perhaps direct staff to bring back a recommendation with a scope of work and cost estimate before jumping into all the staff time and costs and everything. So that's certainly one option, but there are other options in front of the board, but we'll finish the board discussion. Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. So I want to kind of gain a little bit of clarity about the current process. So right now, project proponents for either commercial or residential developments, and I'm talking about residential developments at scale, not you know, individual property enhancements or, you know, building an ADU in your backyard. But the EIR process is where the costs associated with that development show up. So people would be going through, and I'm testing my own knowledge here, so please feel free to correct me. So people would go through the process of doing all the studies associated with their environmental impact report, possibly outlaying substantial funds for biological surveys and soils and all kinds of different assessments of their project. And then after that whole process is complete, somewhere along the line, the staff and the planning commission and everyone would work together to identify what the costs are that they have to bear to mitigate the impacts environmentally, but also their development impacts. Is that correct? Essentially?
That's essentially correct, yes.
Okay, so, and how long is that, I mean, for the McKay project, we know that that was a long process. How long did that take? Okay, so 29 years after they initiated the project, they learned the full scale of the development-related fees they were going to have to pay, or was that a little earlier?
Well, so that iteration of that project goes back to about 2015, I believe. And so the EIR was actually produced in draft form probably in around 21.
Okay.
And then it really was a matter of then looking at the implications of the traffic study and looking at all the numbers and really doing what's called a nexus analysis, because it shouldn't be, and it wasn't, the developer's responsibility to improve all of the intersections that weren't performing adequately, but what is the developer's proportionate share to that? And so Public Works and Planning worked hard to come up with an answer to that question. And that was then written into mitigation measures that were incorporated into the environmental document that then was approved by the Planning Commission of the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
So that happened in a project that took 7 years. That happened 5 years into it.
Okay.
6 years into it. 6.5 years into it, sorry.
And then that project, honestly, my time with it was so short. It was right when I got on the board when we finalized that. So I will say I'm not familiar with whether there were other jurisdictions involved. Were there also impacts that and costs associated with improvements to sewer and perhaps traffic infrastructure in the city of Eureka, et cetera?
The impacts to traffic did involve the city of Eureka,
Okay.
and so that was a bit of a complicating factor. And then the Humboldt Community Services District had a need for a new water tank to provide water pressure and an extension of a sewer line that are conditions of that development.
Okay. So my understanding is that development impact fees could be structured such that, one entity could essentially collect fees associated with the impacts of development and have a process to remit those to the other special districts or cities or other agencies. Is that correct?
That is correct. The difficult part of that is that there needs to be a nexus study to support the fees.
Sure.
And so if, say, the county were to collect fees for several different entities, each of those entities would have to have prepared a different nexus study to identify the improvements that are needed and what the fees are to fund those.
Okay. And what Eureka City Schools was considering, based on my recollection, was the state, like a standard state rate. That wasn't, so that's not the only option on the table, right? We could base something on, and probably would like to base something on our own nexus study really related to specific land uses or types of projects, right?
School fees are a little different because the school district is enabled by the state to collect a certain minimum fee, just almost by right. Some districts just have chosen not to do that.
Sure.
And so that doesn't require a nexus study. If you want to go beyond that, you can. I'll stop talking about schools. I could talk about it too much. But then for the local jurisdiction, it really is what are the improvements, what are the impacts associated with development? And then what are the improvements needed to mitigate that? How much do those cost? And can those be spread out amongst the residences, commercial areas, industrial areas that are proposed? And then there's the rule of reason, whether or not the fee's reasonable, that has to be kind of assessed into that nexus study to determine whether or not it's something that should be imposed or not.
Okay, so this is a little bit apples and oranges from the school example, because this would really be associated with the scale and impact of the project in a different way.
Right, and so like with respect to the CSD, and again using North McKay as an example, if they had a connection fee, normally that connection fee would then pay for things like a water tank, a sewer line extension. So you wouldn't have to install that improvement and pay the connection fee. You pay the connection fee, that pays for the major infrastructure upgrades needed to support new development. And so there's two different ways of going about it. One of the ways that is currently being done is to assess it on a case-by-case basis. The other is to project what's needed, assign fees to it. Then anybody coming in before they even submit an application knows what the fees are. I'm going to build X number of units, X square footage, I'm going to pay this amount of money. They can work their bottom line in before they even submit an application to the county.
Thank you for letting me go through a lot of questions. This is very helpful for my thinking. Do you have any thoughts on kind of how we came to be the only county that doesn't have this structure in place?
Well, I think one of the struggles we have is for a long, long time, we've had such a low growth rate that we haven't generated fees or won't generate fees that would support major facility upgrades. And so we're kind of caught in a little bit of a catch-22. And I will say from a planning standpoint, and this is a bigger policy issue, but what percentage of the housing demand is the county going to provide if Cal Poly substantially expands as planned, if the harbor goes forward and expands as proposed, as offshore wind comes into being, other things like Nordic come along. There's a need for thousands of new residential units. Where are those going to be? And, like ideally, they're in the cities near public transit, but how much of that will the county take on? And then does that change the equation in terms of what's happening in the county relative to the growth rate?
Okay, and I just have one more for now. This can be applied to commercial development as well as residential, right? We're using the McKay example just because that was a recent one, but how do you see this applying to other types of development?
Yes, residential and industrial, frankly.
Okay, thank you.
And Supervisor Bohn?
Well, since we're on the McKay and just using an example, McKay started in 1995, and it was 327 single-family homes. And then about 2003, it was changed to, I think, 78 single-family homes, meeting the guidelines of 1 acre minimums and things like that. And then it changed again, and the latest iteration is 178, I believe, multifamily with 120 single-family homes. So the change has been always there. Now the expansion, the McKay Ranch, has been in the. I literally in 1997 had to add a 6-inch sewer line from my septic tank 225 feet off the property so I could hook into the future McKay Ranch. Cost me quite a bit of money to put all this in and everything else, but I was required to do it by the Community Services District for further development of the McKay, well, back then it was just building some houses. So as we sit there and watch these iterations, 29 years later, from the original drawings and everything else, we still haven't built anything out there. And I don't, besides, and the two subdivisions that have been built within the last 10 years out there are built out, and that developer is not going to do any more. So we're running in. That's my biggest fear, that we're too small to get a Toll Brothers or any of those guys up here. So I just don't. We're going to go back to single family homes. I don't see anybody stepping up because it's just. And as far as the Community Services District, you were asking, just because there's almost $9 million worth of improvements and infrastructure improvements that the McKay Ranch will have to do before they ever pour a foundation. So, I mean, break that out to 320 units, both multifamily or 26 or whatever the case may be. It's a lot of improvements. That doesn't include the property. We don't have the solar. We don't have any of that. So I just don't know if this is the greatest time in the world for us, because we need housing. There's going to be a need. We know that. We're agreed upon that. But is this the time to say, well, they're going to have to build it. Let's get what we can. And I mean, it's not. Well, right now, we need to try to get what we can built to meet these needs, or the needs aren't going to be met. So I'm just going to go back is because of my thing is to see what the appetite is, to see if there's a way we can actually work with the people that are going to pay the fees. We're good at implementing, but we don't ask hey, can you pay this? No, just pay it, or so, and that's historically what all government does, and hopefully we can change that focus. So I'd like us to see the Builders Exchange, the Humboldt, HAR, the independent builders. I'd love to actually talk to a couple of the guys that supply all the building materials, to see, because they see these guys every day and have them around the coffee pots. So somebody from Pearson, Schmidt-Bauer, Mill Yard, Whitethorn Construction, any of that. So I just think we need to have more information before we kind of go any farther on this at all. And I'd rather do this as information focus group than rather a group that's going to come back with developer fees, because it may not be the approach we want to take.
Thank you, Supervisor Bohn, and I want us all to be aware that we have a time set at 10:30 as well, and it is 10:35, so if we can wrap this up. And again, in the agenda item, it does offer a recommendation that we could simply ask for staff to come back to the board with a scope of work and a cost estimate, which I'm assuming that wouldn't be an exorbitant amount of work to do that, and that might be a next step. I mean, we had a good discussion here. I appreciate this being brought forward. We're getting into our budget sessions, and for those who haven't heard, we have a budget crunch coming this year and perhaps for a few more years. And so we're sitting here trying to figure out over the next several months how we're going to balance our budget, how we're going to take care of our roads, schools, police, libraries, parks, trails. I mean, there's a lot of needs out there The question is, what's the best way to be able to finance all these various measures? And it might include sales tax, it might include development fees, it might include parcel taxes, it might include any number of things. But one way or another, we're going to have to try and figure out how we're going to continue to take care of all these facilities and provide services to the community. But we're not going to do that today. I think we've had a robust discussion, and I'm looking for a motion to kind of wrap this up.
Could I hear public comment first?
Yes, before we'll do that. That sounds very good. Let's go ahead and go to Zoom now that the board has completed its discussion. And we do have one hand up in Zoom, and that is 0150 *6 to unmute. And you have 3 minutes. There you go. Welcome.
Hi, Dottie Russell here in Southern Humboldt. I just want to remind everybody that in 2005, when we were going to end homelessness in 10 years, according to our commitment to the federal government, we talked at that time about relaxing some of the fees for somebody that was going to do housing for our community. So to not have hardly any progress made about the 2005 commitment and then think about charging extra money so that we can provide housing for people is completely insane. So and I understand nobody has money, everybody's going to be scared because we don't have any money and all that stuff. But the bottom line is people need someplace to live. And if we need to put tiny homes all over the place, then that's what we need to do with the relaxed, standards for parking and the relaxed standards for paying for things. Recently, a tree fell on a duplex of mine. PG&E came out, they took care of the tree. The line was a little bit lower to the property to the building than it was supposed to be. So PG&E said, just raise it up. It's totally fine. Everything's fine. Just raise it up and you're good. Planning department came and said, you need to rewire the entire duplex. The entire duplex had to be rewired. It cost over $4,000 to have a professional electrician come in. And planning department said it wasn't us that said it had to be done. PG&E said it didn't have to be done. So somebody made it a mandatory thing in order for us to have electricity. This is the kind of thing that we cannot do. In 2005, when they said, okay, we have to, for the general plan, we have to figure out where we can build things and all that stuff. Still, some of the zoning that was approved at those meetings has not been implemented on our website. It's still not even showing mixed use when they're supposed to be mixed use. So I think that we really have to clean up a big old mess and decide if we're going to do any housing or not. Because if we're not going to get any funds from the state. We're not going to get grant funds from the state because they're going to stop giving them to us. So if I sound frustrated, I'm beyond frustrated. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, commenter. And that's it in the Zoom. So we'll go to those in the audience here today. Welcome. You've got 3 minutes, and you can use less if you choose.
I'll try to keep that in mind. Hi, my name is Dave Watson. I'm here representing the Humboldt Builders Exchange. Just to keep it real quick, I'd like to say that we generally agree with Supervisor Bohn's concerns and some of the other concerns that have already been brought up today, specifically in relation to housing and implementing anything that would cause that to be more difficult or cost more money is counterproductive at this point, in our opinion. The one thing I would like to say, though, is absolutely Natalie's point of if we could make this into a streamlining process or somehow make it easier for development along the way, that's absolutely fantastic. But I think the real fear is that that it's going to end up costing more money. We'll establish a secondary bureaucracy. We're going to add more steps, and the environmental impact reports and all the other mitigation are still going to need to happen. So it's hard to see this as a net positive, but I'm absolutely willing to participate in any way that we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Way to model brief. Thank you. Welcome.
Steve Davis, Master of Arts, Interdisciplinary Studies, Media Technology, Public Relations, Marketing and Design from Andrews University. And it was my focus group research project that finished up this advanced degree. So thank you, Supervisor Rex Bohn, for mentioning focus groups at the opportunity to do a qualitative research and explore usually 3 different groups of people with an excellent moderator. You bring them together in a nice space with some food and set the right tone for honest exchange, finding out at what price point are the fees affordable or not, looking at all of our Humboldt County developable land so that we're continuing the exploration of barges and boats in the water and multi-leveled student housing that we just broke ground on, and emergency services, which we still may need due to the flooding and the wildfires and the earthquakes, and our best efforts on supporting our neighbors to the north in Oregon, and hopefully obtaining more and some more beautiful guest houses for our guests now that $368 a night. If you're planning to come during graduation, $200 a night is the amounts to plan on for 2 families coming together at the newly remodeled Blue Lake Casino Hotel, and try and make Cal Poly students abilities affordable, getting their jobs at affordable amounts and complementing their schedules and their classes. My best hope is Area 1 on Aging and matching extra rooms with well-matched roommates and getting those seniors the $1,200 to or more a month. Thank you very much for all considerations every way we can for more affordable, available, and quality guest hospitality. Humboldt County, still the best sustainable place to live on the planet from my perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next, welcome.
Tina Christensen, on the board of directors for HAR, also on the GRC committee, and probably 25 years on the general plan. While I appreciate Natalie bringing this forward, I think that, as I'm hearing, that it is probably not the right time. Housing costs right now, just to build a single-family home, has reached $300 a square foot without the land. We have solar that has to be put in, which is probably $20,000. We have fire sprinklers that is $10,000. We have a lot of fees, and to add another $10,000 fee is horrendous to this building community. I sat in a meeting with most of the major builders, Rex, John, and the builders said, you have to change your requirements. You have to change some of your regulations because we cannot afford to build here. How many subdivisions have came in the last 5 years? Builders are saying, we're not going to build them. And yes, they're of age, they're probably 50 and older, they don't need to build anymore. Our young ones are leaving because of the cost of housing and the pricing. So my suggestion is that you get a stakeholders group together. People that, you know, build the houses, people that pay the fees. If we have the new fees that are coming out for hookup fees for sewer and water, it won't be just Humboldt Community Services District. It will also be the Eureka area. It will also be all the sewer lines were affected in Scotia in Rio Dell, they're all going to be coming in with new fees. So, you know, look at all of us as a county. We all are a county. And we're basically rural. We live on 5% of the land. We have not completed our general plan. We can't meet our RENA numbers, but yet you want to charge another fee. I think you need to really take a look at this and put it
30
in
seconds.
perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. And final comment. Welcome.
Good morning, Supervisors. Thanks for the chance to comment. Mary Ann Hansen, First 5 Humboldt. And when you guys are looking at development impact fees, I want you to consider the impact on childcare and childcare infrastructure. Other municipalities who have studied commercial development and done nexus studies regarding the impact on childcare have found that commercial development impacts in a significant way childcare availability in the community. And so I'll be very brief and just say that I want to humbly request that your board allocate money to planning and building to study this issue and to include childcare as part of that infrastructure. Because you as a board have always been fantastic about thinking ahead for how to serve children and families, and I don't want our childcare infrastructure to be left out of the conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. And so with that, that concludes public comment. We'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Arroyo, and then Wilson.
I want to express appreciation for those who spoke, and you know, having spent almost a decade in public service, I've certainly heard the concerns of local developers, especially when it comes to housing, and I do not take that lightly, and I want to ensure that we're able to support housing growth. And, you know, I just came from being out of town and talking to investors who, you know, want to come to Humboldt County and invest in some of the significant industrial development we're likely to see in the coming years, and who have concerns about the risk, about the costs being known only after they go through a pretty extensive multi-year process. So, you know, my motivation in large part in bringing this forward was to actually make it more clear what the costs that are associated with development impacts are, and not to add an additional cost, but to make those costs more visible up front when people are deciding about whether to invest in a project. And so, you know, I see that as a benefit. That's something that when I went to several years ago, there was that forum in Fortuna at the River Lodge with many local construction companies where, you know, a lot of the discussion was about streamlining and making more clear the process. You know, I think local governments have struggled to do that. There are a lot of regulations and are a lot of stipulations for each government agency that are different. But having a comprehensive study that helps identify those costs up front, I see as frankly a boon to development in the longer term. And when we think about some of these, frankly, these impacts that we can't totally yet envision or predict, but that are likely to come from, you know, I will say there's going to be substantial development on the Samoa Peninsula, for example, a place that, you know, really has pretty limited infrastructure, you know. So when I think about that impact, I want to try to, as the government, get ahead of what that might be, not to discourage development, but to just make more clear what those costs are going to be. I don't actually think it's a great process for people to go through years of planning and studies and invest significantly in a development and then learn at the end what additional costs are going to be added that I think are fair, that are related to, you know, that private development's impact on public sector resources that we all use. But I just don't know how that's development friendly. That's just the process that we currently have. So I really do not intend to add an extra cost for developers by entertaining this, but rather to add that level of clarity. And I will say there's substantial impact, research on the impact of development impact fees, you know, nationwide, that I've really been digging into to try to understand this better. And there are some, as Director Ford pointed out, there are some, potentially negative consequences where, perhaps that won't cover the cost of the impact fully, or, will not cover the life cycle of a project's impact. But I think we can do better at this and be more clear about it, but it would take a lot of effort and a lot of stakeholder engagement to get there. So again, this is not something that I see us deciding right away. But I sure hope we get ahead of some of the bigger development projects that are coming our way, as if we want to implement something like this.
Okay, and again, conscious of the time, it'd be nice to wrap this up if we could. I've got Supervisor Wilson in the queue, and then Supervisor Bohn.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. A couple things. One, there's a theme about, is this a good time? And I will say I've never heard the development community say this is a good time to consider development fees. I just don't think that is, it's always in challenging times, and it's in challenging times for this county as well as counties across the state and in the United States. And so, but we are also dealing with the challenge of providing services and infrastructure that exists, whatever decision we make today and into the future, and it's where we're at now comes from the decisions from the past. So I think there are plenty of communities that are being more effectual at meeting their RENA numbers and their housing, and do have pretty significant fees. And I'm not suggesting that I don't even know what fees we might even consider, but I'm just saying that the fees by themselves aren't necessarily what drives housing overall. But I do understand the concern with relationship to the impact. And I also want to mention that if the staff, if we choose to move forward with this, a lot of some of those fees are tied with self-funding opportunities, and that what that is like there are programs and funding opportunities that are availed to communities that self-fund. That if you have a fee for certain types of development or certain activities, that then it avails you. So there's actually leveraging opportunities. So there's actually an opportunity for more investment from tax monies we already pay to the state and feds. And so we would want to highlight, I think, if there are opportunities for more funding that would be leveraged from fees, I think we really have that and talk about it. We talked about connection fees, and a lot of this is, in essence, a connection fee. It's not necessarily you're connecting to a sewer, but you're connecting to society. You're connecting to all the services that a business or a commercial and even residential development would, and even a single residential development would attach itself to. And I understand that it's pretty slow on the single residential within our some of our landscapes. It's certainly slower in southern Humboldt, but maybe faster in, say, McKinleyville. And we have semi-urban spaces and semi-rural spaces, which we have to account for. I don't know how we define rural necessarily under the fee structure. I mean, we just had a subdivision map on our consent calendar, which are 20-acre subdivision, 20-acre parcels, in an area that is generally building what are high-end homes. Is that adjacent to a somewhat suburban landscape? Where does that fit in? And what are we trying to incentivize, or what are we trying to exempt? And by exemption, what is it that we are trying to, who's the beneficiary of the exemption, and then who actually pays for that exemption? I think we have to be real about that. And those are just some of my comments with this. I'm happy to make the motion. I guess should I just do it right now? And then
time to do a motion.
All right, I'll make a motion to ask staff to identify facilities that require development impact fees in order to maintain adequate levels of service. And I would say facilities and programs, because I don't know necessarily if it's just a facility-related discussion. And to bring a recommendation back to the Board of Supervisors with a scope of work and cost estimate, just based on what we have here in the recommendations.
I'll second that. And I'd like to say that by no means means that I am dead set on an outcome right now. I really want to see what the staff analysis produces.
All right, thank you for that. And wrapping it up, Supervisor Bohn.
Okay, now I'm all for developer fees if it will streamline the process and not raise the price. It's going to bundle, from what I understand, it's going to bundle a bunch of stuff we're already charging them for. So there will be no increase in price. And as I think the Builders Exchange said, they would love, if we can explain to them this isn't going to be an increased price, but it's also going to streamline the process, because the biggest thing they'll tell you is time is money. And if they can get these things built, but the biggest problem is the builders, things are cyclical. And the quicker we get things built, I mean, just McKay Ranch, it would have been built 20 years ago when they first brought it forward, 5 years after, if we would have gone through the process and everything else, we would have been getting, in excess of $800,000 a year in property tax. Well, you start figuring that out after, so that's $17, $18 million after after a 20-year process. So, and then we get the sales tax on all the materials, everything, all this money that could have been paying for infrastructure, parks, fire, police, everything we keep talking about that's driven more by sales tax dollars and everything else. If we could have implemented these projects, and 20 years ago, square foot to build a house was $117.50. So now all of a sudden we've got affordable housing. We'd have 300 more units, but we tend to squeeze them dry can we get a little bit more? Can we get a little bit more? And we don't get built. And we keep talking, we're going to need 1,000 homes minimum for teachers, fishmongers, wind farmers, and we're building 100 a year, and that's covering what we need right now. So it's not going to happen the way we're doing things. So we can send staff off to say, how can we get more fees? We get more fees, get more fees. I would much rather send staff out and ask them, what can we do to streamline the process, make it work environmentally, not beat this horse to death, and get houses built? And work with the people that are paying the bills, our builders and stuff, because I can tell you, I mean, I've got it shoved in my face more than a few times in the last few weeks. We've had a meeting 4 years ago, we had a meeting 7 years ago, we had a 9 years ago, 13 years ago, we started how do we help Tom Sutton, this back in how do we streamline, how do we make things go better? John would like to make things go better because then his phone rings less. So as we're telling staff to do this, why don't we ask them what we can do for them? And it's not just throw money at it. The problem is the more demands we make, the more staff we need. The less demands we make, maybe it's less staff. Maybe that's maybe we should reincarnate Ernie Pearson and says, how'd you do it, Ernie? Because everybody here has lived in a Pearson house, I think, or, looked at a Pearson house. But, there's a lot of old-time subdividers out there, and I don't want to call Kirk Kramer an old-time subdivider, but he's looking at not being a subdivider anymore, and there's going to be a big, and that's within 300 yards of a pizza and a Mexican and a breakfast restaurant and a grocery store. It's within 150 yards 200 yards of a bus line, which we'll run buses down to it with that kind of thing. So I think as we're doing this and seeing what more we can do and not increase fees but streamline, I hope that's in there.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we've had a robust discussion, public comment, and we have a motion and a second. We have our voting tabs up. Let's go ahead and cast our votes.
I can Go ahead and do a roll call vote for this one.
Please.
Okay, we'll go with Supervisor Bohn.
I'm going to vote yes and hope for the best.
Thank you. Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
No.
And Supervisor Wilson?
I will vote yes and also hope for the best.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-1.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I know folks would probably like to have a break, but we're running a half hour behind. What I'd like to suggest is we'll do a break at 11:30 when we break for our closed session, if that will work for the board members. If it doesn't work, just jump out right now and go ahead and take care of that. What kind of leeway do we have on the closed session?
I believe that we can go a small bit past
10 or 15
11:30.
minutes past?
Yes.
Okay. That would give us about 45 minutes, so I think we can get it done, especially because this is technically really just an informational item. And if Deputy Clerk of the Board, Tracy D'Amico, will start the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Today's item is brought to you by the Clerk of the Board's office because we're mandated to represent the board-appointed boards, commissions, and committees. So from time to time, these appointing bodies reach out to us to bring an item on their behalf to the Board of Supervisors. On April 18th in 2023, the Board of Supervisors received from the chair of the Fish and Game Advisory Commission a letter regarding the need to retain public access to our rivers and coastal areas. So this morning, I would like to introduce Bruce Can. He is going to be speaking on behalf of the Fish and Game Advisory Committee. It's an informational report on that topic. Bruce?
Great. Thank you very much. And as an informational report, we probably won't get into a lot of discussion here at the board. We're going to hear the presentation from the commission, take public comment, and then deliberate and move forward. Welcome.
So good morning, Chairman Madrone and board members. My name is Bruce Can. I live in Eureka, and I'm here representing the Humboldt County Fish and Game Advisory Commission to summarize what's in the April 18th letter the commission sent to you and why the commission felt it was a good idea to send this letter in the first place. So the purpose of the Humboldt County Fish and Game Advisory Committee is to serve as an advisory capacity to the Board of Supervisors in all matters concerning fish and wildlife within the County of Humboldt. The commission meets the third Tuesday of every month, 6:30 p.m. at the Elks Lodge on Herrick Avenue in Eureka, and the public is welcome to attend our meetings and provide input. So I'm the newest member on the commission, and tonight will be the fourth meeting I've had the privilege to attend. At each meeting so far, the topic of hunting and fishing access came up. Several commissioners, including myself, expressed concern that more and more restrictions are being placed on river access each year, and in some places eliminated altogether, particularly on the lower Eel River. So since we were talking about river access, I brought up the Fisher Road issue, and I was given the thumbs up to summarize what's been happening this past year or so up to the current situation. Commission members expressed concern that 1, vacating this popular river access road is not in the best interests of the public. 2, Fisher Road should forever remain open to public use. And 3, the county should try to find a way to provide public river access again. There was mention that the river is designated, quote, navigable, and by definition, we all have a, quote, right to access the river, particularly at this location given Fisher Road's long history. I asked the commission if the commission should send a letter to the Board of Supervisors expressing our concerns. The answer was yes. The commission agreed that the letter should recommend that the county pursue a deeded public right-of-way along Fisher Road to the river. I mentioned that a deeded right-of-way might have to end short of the river as the county's maintenance of the road ends at the concrete barricades. I suggested, to my best recollection, that the letter mentioned something about the potential need for a prescriptive right-of-way if necessary. I volunteered to write a draft letter for the commissioners to review, comment, and make changes. The draft letter was emailed to all commission members and available for their review for at least 2 weeks. At our last meeting on April 18th, I brought several copies of the draft letter so any commissioner wanting to review it again could do so and make changes as necessary. The final letter was signed at the commission meeting and emailed to the Board of Supervisors shortly afterward. So I just want to conclude that I did my best in writing this draft letter to reflect the ideas, concerns, and perspectives of the commission members as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And are there any questions, clarifications from board members? Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. It was nice to finally meet you. I had a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, when your committee was discussing the issue and the issue with Fisher Road, if you reached out to Director Mattson as, to get some ideas and thoughts regarding this. And also I had a question concerning Fisher Road. You've been personally involved in this for quite some time.
Yes.
Chair, if I could interrupt real briefly. It's the advice of county counsel's office that we deliberate briefly on the issue of public access, but we do not get into the Fisher Road matter open forum.
Say that again.
It's the advice of the county counsel's office that you can discuss generally the issue of public access as it applies to the county, but the Fisher Road issue specifically should be discussed not in an open forum.
Okay, thanks for that. So Bruce, I'm going to redirect that question. Did you reach out to staff to get any advice from staff when you were drafting this letter?
Not when I was drafting this letter, but previously I've been in communication with Deputy Director Bronkel about certain issues and the Land Use Division.
And is your letter reflective of any of that information? Is the letter coming from this committee reflective of any of that information
Any information
that you've received from Mr. Bronkel, including his thoughts and about public access? Did you include that in this letter?
I think that's hard to say because we did a lot of talking back and forth. And so, I would say yes, but I'm not sure. I would have to get a more specific question, I guess, about a particular topic, I think.
That's all I wanted to know, was that
Okay.
if it was reflective of some of the staff's thoughts. So I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Supervisor Bohn.
And to stay within the parameters as we explore both for the Great Trail and fisheries and hunting access, considering I do both, so I'm very interested in everything else. When it comes, did you discuss with Bronco on any of the accesses in your letter from the Fishing Game Commission, how you were going to deal with private property rights, where access will need to go off of the historic? There's areas that have been accessed for years, and then they've because rivers move and things change and landslides and everything else, the accesses have changed to actually incorporate something that's never had been used before, but that is all private property. And then, so, we've had access, and I can tell you, and I see Steve out there, because we've been looking at this for 10, 12 years along, the eel and stuff like that. A big problem is that some of this property has changed hands. And some of the people that owned it in the past were a lot more aware. But in this day and age, liability has got to be such a fear for these people that if we're providing an access, do we have to provide a safe access? Because it's been a public access for so long down at the Warswick and some of our own properties and things like that Tom has been, and Public Works has been so great about providing keys so they can sign off saying we do not say that this is going to be, but we do have issues with public access and the liability that comes with it, especially on private property. And so I think that's not something any of us ever had to face in the past. It's just been always been, yeah, come on, go ahead, you can use it and everything else. And for myself, knowing how many properties I've crossed upon and asked, brought a couple crab to it and everything else, says, yeah, and guys, they feel really bad. They're saying, yeah, I'm just not doing it anymore because then it just brings more people, and it's the access issue and it's the liability issue because we have a lot of lawyers looking for that kind of thing. So was that coming up? Is that coming up to be an issue when you were talking to Bronco or anybody, that the liability issue on some of these accesses?
When I spoke to Bronco about certain issues, I wasn't even on the commission at that point. And so if I can switch and talk personally about what I did instead of the commissions, representing the commission, or I've talked to Bronco and I've read the staff report and
well, again,
over and over again, but
on the advice of counsel, we're not really going to get into the specifics of this particular issue here. And I think the questions that Supervisor Bohn was asking is trying to be generic, in terms of public access. Clearly, there are lots of issues around all this kind of stuff. But again, today, I believe what we're going to be doing is just accepting and filing this letter. But I appreciate you being here to represent the commission. And with that, are there any other questions from the board before we take public comment? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much for being here. And so at this point, we'll go to those in Zoom, as I always do first. And we have 2 hands up, 3 hands now. And one of them, the first one is 8859 and *6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Chairman Madrone and Supervisors. My name is Alicia Heyman, and I'm here representing both Friends of the Eel and the Great Redwood Trail Coalition. I know you've already seen our letter from a diverse coalition of organizations that support preserving public access, and that you've heard from many community members who value this relatively rare point of access on the Van Dusen River. And many of those people also have used this road to access the river for decades. I want to focus right now on reminding the board that about 30 years ago, the supervisors proudly protected public river access, even going as far as litigating to preserve public access at Oddfellows Park Road in the Best v. Humboldt County case referenced in our letter. And, in short, that the ruling from that case established that the Van Dusen is a navigable waterway, and as such, the public has a right to use the water the river, and the riverbed up to the high water mark. I'm sorry, just one second. While the county was victorious in court, somehow nothing was ever done to actually preserve access to the river, and so the public nature of Oddfellows Park Road is virtually non-existent. Fisher Road faces the same threat. It's public road along... anyway, I think I need to get off, but I just want to say that I really hope that the board follows the recommendation of the Fish and Game Commission to protect public access and ensure that we don't lose access to this historical fishing spot. Thank you.
Thank you both. And next we have 0150, *6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Hi, Dottie Russell again, talking about southern Humboldt. There's a lot of river from all the way from Fortuna, down quite a ways. and having just generic public access that is completely unsupervised in an area that is quite remote with access by car down to the river is a terrible idea unless it's specific where it is, when the gate gets closed, and how it's going to be handled and addressed. Because if you have, you know, I mean, there are areas in southern Humboldt that people will drive down. A fun idea is to drive down to the river, have a little picnic, whatever. But it's not a fun idea if somebody drives down, meets 4 other people, deals meth, then one of the cars breaks down, the other one has a flat tire. They all stay there all night long doing drugs, trying to get other people to come and join them. So there has to be some kind of supervision. There has to be some kind of plan, set up, scripted, whatever it's going to be, so that you just don't have a horrible mess on your hands. So on a piece of property of ours, that situation happened down by the river, and we actually had to get tow trucks and tow these people out and take them where they wanted to go in China Creek. So that's the extent of what responsibility a landowner has if it's not supervised and there aren't hard, steadfast rules what can and cannot happen. So let's try to collectively figure out how to have the enjoyment of the river without leaving needles and drug dealers and cars that don't run behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have 8022. *6 to unmute. There you go. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Bruce Sylvie, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Humboldt Trails Council. The Trails Council is in support of the report the board has received from the Fish and Game Advisory Commission on retaining public access to Humboldt navigable rivers. In particular, the council supports the county maintaining and securing the historical public access to the Van Dusen River at the foot of Fisher Road. Humboldt Trails Council is working hard to support the development of the Great Redwood Trail, which was recently rail banked and includes that 5-mile Carlotta branch that intersects Fisher Road. The river access at this point is the only access along that Carlotta branch trail, and the Trails Council believes that a clear river access point will have an important impact on the number of people using the trail. The more people who use the trail, the safer the users feel, and the less unwanted activities will occur on the trail. Also, there is added benefit of a healthier and happier community with increased trail use in the county. We understand that it's the board's job to make decisions that are in the public's best interest, and at times that may involve releasing historical access. Given the amount of public support to maintain Fisher Road and this river access, we are confident this is not one of those times. We ask the board to direct staff to negotiate a clear access for the public to maintain this historical easement to the river. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter.
Thank you for your comments. And that's it in the Zoom. So we'll go to those here in the audience today. Please come forward and let us know your name. And you've got 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Steve Rosenberg. I'm a retired attorney and an ardent hunter and fisherman with many years of experience in Humboldt County. I'm sure that Rex and Mike are tired of hearing me moan and groan about our gradual loss of all of our public river and bay access. This particular access has been used at least for 75 years, and not only Fisher Road, but the narrow strip of private property between the Van Dusen River Bar and the end of the road has been used until a few years ago for over 75 years continuously, despite the fact it's been in private property ownership. In the last several years, a gate and then berms have been erected at the end of the county right-of-way. And so people have to park at the end of the road, and it's inadequate. And now the owner seeks to have the access abandoned. The problem with that is that according to California constitutional law and case law, especially Best versus County of Humboldt, it's clear that the public has a permanent right by this long-established use to not only require the county to continue the county road in effect, and also the public has a right to use the private property's narrow strip of land for access to the river bar as it has for 75 years. I sent Mike Wilson a copy of Best versus County of Humboldt. I think you should all read it, because that would assuage, I believe, Rex fears that the county would be liable. The public already has an easement onto that river bar, so how could the landowner be liable for it? I realized that the reason we're losing all these accesses is because of transients and garbage dumping. But there's a way to handle that through enforcement, key access, things like that, so that it become responsible. But I cannot implore on you the importance of maintaining our beach, our bay, and our river accesses, and we're gradually losing those. And
30 seconds.
And so I thank you for your attention to this. It's more important than you think, this access. It's probably more important than building houses here, because it's the reason we live here is because we have access to places so wonderful like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. And anyone else choose to come forward today and make a public comment? This is your opportunity. Yes, please come forward. Welcome.
Board, my name is Kelly Patton. My wife and I are the landowners on Fisher Road. And so there is no deeded right-of-way all the way down Fisher Road. That turned out through the process that it's not even a deeded right-of-way. It'd be up for argument on whatever other implied or whatever is there. But there is, not by our doing. I had Estelle, when she was the supervisor, come out there with Army Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife was there. I think Mr. Manthorn, I believe is his name. And so they made us pull all the armor out of the bank that had been there 35 plus years, protected that parking lot. Everything was hunky-dory other than the fact that there was constant dumping of cars, drug use, garbage, those kind of things. But basically, we argued about this process of what them pulling the armor out was going to do to the access. They told me I was a fool and I didn't know what I was talking about. First winter, 5 years ago, washes all out, gets blocked off. And not by our doing. I did everything I could to keep it open, but we're not going to give up more land or give up part of our field to give new access to the county. It's millions of dollars for the county to spend to build a ramp down that if we could come to an agreement. But with everything that the county's spending money on, I mean, that's your guys' call, but everything that the county's got to pay for, they really want to build a ramp down to the Eel River when there's access. It's not even a mile away to Bess's is county or state access. It's probably 500 yards from where the parking lot used to be to the access at Bess's, maybe 700 yards. But so there's access right down the road. There's also, so these statements of there's no other access are not correct. There's also access at Church Lane. There's access at Root Creek. There's many accesses that are not under this issue of it getting washed away by basically the feds making that armor come out of the bank, the Army Corps of Engineers. So I just wanted to correct the statements that there are many other accesses within a 10, 15 mile run up and down 36. But Friday morning, I'm going to work 5 o'clock in the morning to go out Fisher Road, and what do I run into? Some transient driving down the road with a pickup full of garbage. Turned them around and got them out of there. But they had a pickup bed was full of garbage. What are you doing at 5 o'clock in the morning other than going to dump garbage down there? You know, so we're just fed up with dealing with that along with the other issues that we spoke about with the vacation. The vacation application's we're not pursuing that any further. So, okay. All right, I appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that. Any other public comments? Please, welcome.
Missed this, said nobody ever. My husband covered a lot of the points, but I have to definitely, just listening to the earlier portions of our meeting, it's brought up about the awareness that I've been presented with. The awareness of people making comment and people having opinions and people being outraged about things they don't know. They're not educating themselves to property law or to what the story is or to the other side of the story. I was just talking about Humboldt State University, for example. I got to the back of the story in one text message. Wasn't diversified. They weren't setting those people aside. That's not the truth. But if people don't choose to find out what the truth is and what property law is, we're going to continue to repeat and repeat these issues. So with Bruce Can, with Steve, I welcome you guys to talk to us personally. And I can definitely tell you, in this particular case of these two gentlemen, had they just approached us personally, one-on-one, respectfully, we might not be in the same situation we're in right now. But to slam us on social media for untruths, and to anybody, the other portion of it is, I think it's interesting that Bruce has now joined this commission after he repeatedly went to the board members that told him he had no right, their laws were against him, to the planning department, to Tom and Bob Bronkel, who I know for a fact, because we were all confused at why this even came to here today, because nothing that they told Bruce was at all in that letter. We were confused at why this was coming here again. And I appreciate the fact that council is saying that we can't specifically talk about Fisher Road, because property law says that given the act of Mother Nature taking away the access to the river, we are not responsible for relocating it or granting you space to go through. That's all I have to say. If anybody wants to talk to Kelly and I in regards to the specific situation, all you have to do is pick up the phone. You can call it old school or what you want. I just don't believe in slamming people in social media without knowing the truths. I appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board, and yes, no problem. I'll give you plenty of time.
Well,
welcome, Mr. Noble.
It's called sepsis. It gets in your leg, buddy. I don't want this light to blind you.
Yeah.
I'm Jack Noble. I'm the neighbor, downriver, upriver, together with the Besses, who owns property up there. Okay. We're at opposite ends of the pole. I've been on that river since 1947. I'm an old man and I'm tired. Okay. I don't know of any of the landowners up and down that road, any that have contributed any actual cash up front as far as maintaining that road. Tom Matson's sitting over here, and he knows my history. I've maintained that road onto the river bar for at least 50 years. Okay? I don't deny access to anyone. I don't have a garbage problem. And the reason I didn't have a garbage problem, that existed once upon a time. Real easy. They always take their garbage, their identification stuff, but they never remember their PG&E bill. You know, they never remember, you know, whatever. All you need is one of them. Give it to the game warden. That garbage person never comes back. And you only have to do that once or twice a year for the first 10 or 15 or 20 years, and it kind of slacks down. As to Fisher Road, we use Fisher Road, River Bar Road, and from the other end, Fisher Road down this end, all right? When we haul gravel out of there, we have a gravel permit that specifies that traffic cannot go west onto 36 because when you come off of 36, Highway 36, you drop over that hill and Fisher Road's right there. And if people would be driving 55 miles an hour, you could probably get away with it. But you can't drag a 60-foot truck across that road and head west without somebody's going to die. And we had one lady there for a long time that she liked to top that hill about 75 or 80 miles an hour. Why she's still alive, I don't know. Anyway, enough of that. I'm down to 32 seconds. I'm the local historian, all right? I came there living in a sawmill with my dad, sleeping in a tent. And now we run up and down that river, and we try to take care of it, and we try to respect it. If you have any questions at all, I'm more than available to you. I'll answer them honestly, truthfully, but I just don't agree with it. The idea that the public can't come down there. I support the public coming down there.
Thank you, Mr. Noble. All right, any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board, and I've got Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. I want to thank all the commenters, and there is a you know, a variety of opinions around these issues around public access to public trust resources. In essence, we are a public trust agency, and we have public trust responsibilities with relationship to access to public trust resources throughout the county, whether they're beaches or rivers or those areas that were deemed basically at the founding of the state of California to be public trust resources, and access is important. I think Supervisor Bohn illustrated something that is that we take for granted often, which I think for those of us on the board who know people, who know landowners, there's a certain amount of privilege that we have that in knowing people and having access across private lands that most of the public doesn't have those relationships and doesn't have that ability to access those spaces. And so we have I believe we have a public trust obligation to do what we can to maintain and further access for the general public to the public trust resources that we all maintain together as citizens of the state of California. So that's as broadly as I can put it, I think, in terms of that. And with that, I'll make a motion to receive and file this report.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I have a comment.
Okay, so we have a motion by Supervisor Wilson and a second by Supervisor Arroyo, and we have comment by Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you, through the chair. I want to recognize what Supervisor Wilson and Supervisor Bohn both said. I think it's a very fine line when you're dealing with public and public access and those rights, and also the rights of the private property owner. I do think that communication, as the property owner said, goes a long ways, and having that face-to-face communication often can result in lots of issues being resolved. And it's worth the consideration to approach it that way. I do recognize that, as I think Steve, is your name Steve, I think said?
Rosenberg, yep.
You know, you guys have been fishing down there for a long time, and to all of a sudden have any public assets, not just the, you know, seems to be around Fisher Road, but through the letter is general, it is not fun. That is why you guys are here. Your retirement, you want to be able to access those rivers, so I want to recognize that. Bruce, also, I know that you're very a fisherman as well, and that, you know, is a hard adjustment when things change. Change is never easy for anyone, and to have those things happen to seem like it happens overnight without having that discussion, I know can be difficult. And so the letter in general about the access throughout Humboldt County is welcomed, and I look forward to that discussion as it comes. I do recognize the sensitivity of the issue, and really want to thank the commoners and the landowners for being here, and for the Fish and Game Commission or committee recognizing the interest of the public. And so that's what I wanted to say. Just thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Well, with that, I think we're ready to go ahead and vote on this motion in front of us.
Is
We're
yours
waiting
up,
for a few.
Supervisor Bohn? Is your tab up? Do you want me to do a roll call?
No, it's up now.
Oh, it is up. Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, great. And thank you very much for all being here today. And with that, we have closed session items scheduled. We actually have, I believe, 2 or 3 items. And if we can read those into the record before we adjourn, and we'll take public comment on that. Thank you all for being here. So, are you reading the closed session items into the record?
Yes, Chair.
Very good.
Item 1 is the intention of the Board of Supervisors to meet in closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9 D1 in order to discuss existing litigation in the cases of White Circle Commerce, LLC et al. Versus the County of Humboldt. Humboldt County Superior Court Case Number CV2000513 and CV2000623. It's also the intention of the Board of Supervisors to meet in closed session pursuant to California Government Code 54956.9D2 and E3 in order to discuss exposure to litigation in one potential case regarding the claim of wrongful termination submitted by Kathy Childs.
Great, thank you very much. And we'll take public comment at this time on these closed session items. And I'm going to my Zoom. I don't see any hands up there. And I'm going to the audience here today. Anybody wish to make public comment on our closed session? And seeing none, we're going to come back and we're going to adjourn, and it will take us approximately an hour, maybe a little longer, to come back. And we do have one more item on the agenda from Area 1 Agency on Aging, and that is their annual report and a proclamation. So we are in recess. Okay, welcome back. We are out of recess, and if we could have the CAO Hayes read any actions into the record from our closed session.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. There was no reportable action to be taken with regards to item F3 or F4.
Great, thank you very much. And we have 2 items left on the agenda. We have the Older Americans Month proclamation, which we're going to do first, and then we're going to go to the item that was pulled, I think it was D3, for aviation as our final agenda item for the day. So I'll go ahead and read this proclamation and then ask to come up and receive it. And I believe you also have an annual report you're going to give for us. So that's great. Yeah, please come on up and have a seat. So this is a proclamation of the Board of Supervisors, County of Humboldt, in honor of Older Americans Month. Whereas the County of Humboldt includes a growing number of older Americans who contribute their time, wisdom, and experience to our community, and whereas communities benefit when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds have the opportunity to participate and live independently, And whereas the County of Humboldt recognizes the need to create a community that offers the services and supports older adults may need to make choices about how they age, and whereas the County of Humboldt can work to build an even better community for our older residents by not limiting our thinking about aging, exploring and combating stereotypes, emphasizing the many positive aspects of aging, inspiring older adults to push past traditional boundaries, and embracing our community's diversity. Now therefore, the County of Humboldt Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim May 2023 to be Older Americans Month and urge every resident to celebrate our older citizens, help to create an inclusive society, and accept the challenge of flexible thinking around aging. So.
There we go. You need the green light.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this, and I appreciate that today has already been a long day and a long meeting for you, as they always are, but I appreciate the attention, the time, and I wanted to start, I'm Maggie Kraft with the Area 1 Agency on Aging. Sorry about that. I wanted to start by just reading a quote from a woman named Ashton Applewhite. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she is a woman who works to fight aging, ageism, and ableism. And she's a great speaker. If you've never heard her, I encourage you to Google her and learn more about what she does. She's got some great things going, but I wanted to read you a quote. Aging isn't a problem to be solved, or a disease to be cured, or something icky that old people do. It's how we move through life, and more of us are doing more of it than ever before in human history. What stands between us and making the most of these longer lives? Ageism, judging, stereotyping, and discriminating against people on the basis of how old we think they are. Ageism is what we experience anytime someone assumes that we are too old or too young for something, instead of finding out who we are and what we're capable of. But we can fight ageism. And she goes on to say there's 3 critical things we can do, and the first thing is awareness, is to acknowledge our own prejudices about age and aging. And then the second thing is integration. But continue to connect with people of all ages. Any equitable society for all ages requires intergenerational collaboration. And instead of labeling people boomers or millennials, simply describe them as older or younger. It's simpler and it's always true. It doesn't divide or stereotype. It emphasizes that we age in relation to others and that we're all on this ride together. The last thing is activism. Watch for ageist behaviors and attitudes in and around us and challenge them, and start creating language and models that support every stage of life. A great resource to learn more about her work, she has a blog that's called yoisithisageist.com. And oldschool.info is a place you can go to learn more, find more tools around ageism and how to address it. And then her book, thischairrocks.com, is that. And the other thing people can do certainly is to call us at our organization if they need any kind of help. If they are over 60 or taking care of somebody who is over 60, we can help get you hooked up to the resources you need. So I think I'll go here to the slides real quick. Some of these, some of you have seen these before, but since I was last here, we have some new board members, and so I'm going to share some basics, and I'll go through this fairly quickly. You know where we are. We are celebrating our 43rd birthday as your area agency on aging. We started in 1980. And the decision at that time was, instead of the 2 counties creating a joint powers authority or something like that, you decided to work with Patty Berg, who started the organization, to run it as a local nonprofit and have the activities that the counties would generally be doing, have it done by us. This is our vision statement and our mission. And the area, of course, we serve, as you know, it's a big area, and you all serve it as well, so you know the travel that you all are doing to serve at least the Humboldt portion of this. Area agencies start, Congress passed the Older Americans Act in '65, and the area agencies, as I said, or I have not said, but they started in 1950. 1950 years ago, so do the math on that. I can't. But there are 33 around the state, and most of them are parts of county government, and we are one of a handful of nonprofits. We are serving people over the age of 60 and their caregivers, and more people under the age of 60 with disabilities. We are looking at supporting people primarily with economic, social need, and really looking at low-income and minority older adults. We don't charge for our services, so anybody over 60 can receive them regardless of their income. And these are the things we do. We identify needs. We advocate for local older adults and their caregivers. We provide direct service, but we also provide funds to other programs in our two-county area, and then we monitor those funds. So we're doing direct service, but we're also about, sometimes more than half of our funding goes out to subcontractors. And this just gives you, we're defined in the Older Americans Act, the Older Californians Act, in terms of our role. But the idea is to develop a comprehensive and coordinated system to deliver services. Well, of course, that sounds really good, but much of the money that is provided to older adults to provide services or to receive services in communities doesn't flow through Older Americans Act funding. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to be done with other entities, including the county government, to make sure we're not duplicating services and that we're really paying attention to what the needs are and trying to address them as well as we can as a community versus individually. These numbers are slightly old, but the red line is still the red line, and we are the growing population of people over 60, both in Del Norte and here in Humboldt. And the numbers, some of the numbers in terms of insecurity, financial insecurity, food insecurity, living alone, a lot of these things. Geographic isolation is pretty, it's pretty revealing, and we do see that. We do see a lot of people living alone, and certainly during COVID, there were some challenges with that the community has had to address and be responsible for, and just kind of realize that we could all do better in terms of what we're doing for people who need help. Probably the main thing to say is, and you've heard this before, but the people over 50 years of age are the fastest growing population of homeless who are homeless for the first time. And we're seeing that because of the rising cost of housing and everything, and people living on fixed income, people who have health issues of any kind and cannot work or have lost their jobs for whatever reason. That's what it takes to become homeless. We Americans don't have a lot of money saved up, so if you're in this situation, you can become homeless pretty quickly, and we're seeing that. So this is what funding looks like, and the bag at the top should be really big, and then as they should be smaller when they get down. But we get federal funding, we get California state funding. Funding comes to us, and we disperse it based on what our needs assessments show and what the requirements of that funding are. So we cannot take our nutrition dollars and put them into legal services, for example. We have to fund what the Older Americans Act requires of us. The funding is siloed. Like I said, we can't move it. We also receive funding from Humboldt County, thank you, and from Del Norte and City of Eureka and Caltrans. But most of our funding is governmental funding, and most of what we do is governmentally mandated. These are the folks we subcontract with for services, nutrition programs, senior center, Humboldt Senior Center, Del Norte Senior Center, Legal Services of Northern California, and Redwood Caregiver Resource Center. Those last two serve both counties. And they actually, both of those entities serve many more counties than just ours. So what do we do? This is just a laundry list of things that we have going at our organization. Our main program for access is information assistance. People call, find out what they need to they sometimes call with one issue and they don't realize. I had a woman once call me who was 84 years old looking for a job. And if I had simply referred her to senior employment, that would have been the end of that, and who knows what would have happened. But I started talking to her about why she needed a job, and it was because she didn't have enough food. So then I started talking to her about food instead, and finding her food, and not finding her a job, because she really needed more food. She didn't need to work, and she didn't know about the resources. We have a home share program that's been really running, matching people with housing to with people who are looking for a room to rent. That has been, many of the people that we're matching up, the people looking for housing, their income is so low that they could not find anything on the open market here. We help keep people living in their homes with safety, fall prevention. We have some digital divide classes, our volunteer driver program, and education around elder abuse prevention. High cap, very popular, helps people with Medicare, not because Medicare is popular, but because Medicare is very confusing. And we have a lot of people who really need help to figure out how to best access these services. Our ombudsman program advocates for people in long-term care facilities, and all these programs uses a lot of volunteers. So that is something we're currently looking at, is really bringing back our volunteer numbers after COVID, because most of our volunteers are over 60 and they had to back off, and some of them decided to retire, and we need to replace them. We need more volunteers there. We have our exercise class that went on Zoom during COVID, and now they're starting to meet more in person, but there's amazing. There are people who are still doing it via Zoom, and it really works for them. We do a lot of disaster response, or gotten more into this world, as many of us have, as we see more disasters and more things happen. We're involved with what was going on in Rio Del after the earthquakes and trying to support older adults there. What we saw is there are times when the older adults don't speak up and say what they need. They don't want to ask for help. And I know Supervisor Bushnell was there. She saw a lot of this, and they really need help and they need advocacy, because they often are willing to just let someone tell them that it is what it is and there's nothing they can do. And so that is a concern, and that happens all the time around disaster and other situations. So we're in this space also. These are some other things we have going. We have CalFresh expansion and healthy living contracts. We are working with Tri-County Independent Living to develop an aging and disability resource connection service, which is really about not creating a new entity, but about looking at how people receive service and try to make it more streamlined, more efficient, and recognizing that nobody wants to come and tell everybody their story over and over and over again. So looking at systems throughout our county where all the different organizations that are serving people and impacting people are working together with a coordinated system of referral and follow-up. And we're working with the IPA and the NCHIN, the North Coast, North Coast, I should know this, NCHIN. Anybody else know that? Help Improvement Network. There's something, yeah, that's close. There's another I in there, but, and they're creating a wonderful system that we're hoping more and more organizations get on board to use. And that's what we're doing with that. Caltrans funding for our volunteer driver program. We also received some extra help this year from Eureka City to really do the outreach for the volunteer driver program, and also the home share program that I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, the county's giving us the money we need to match the state and federal dollars. And then one-time only grants that are really helpful at times. So I think last time I talked a little bit about the funding that came from COVID was really amazing, wonderful, confusing, bureaucratic, siloed, difficult. But there were some good things that we were able to do with that money and still are. These are all, just so you know, you all know because you were getting this too, but we actually got a separate silo of funding to buy robotic pets for nursing home facilities, which was really cool, but again, a lot of silos with the funding. But those are all the different funds that were coming through in the last few years, and all are requiring different bureaucratic responses as well as service responses. We also, this last year, were able to provide some support to some organizations that we don't typically contract with to help them with nutrition infrastructure needs. And we are working now with some organizations around garden development through CalFresh. These are just some numbers so you can see what 2021, that was our budget was $2.5 million, and about 44% of that was contracted to our subcontracted. Our current budget is $4.1 million, with about 67 of that subcontracted out. And this next year, we're anticipating about $3.7 million, with maybe 50% of that contracted. So it's a huge jump you can see over the years. And the infrastructure, as probably in the county level, just building up the staffing infrastructure to manage all these funds has been very challenging. But we're doing our best. This is some money that we received from the state, and it was scheduled to sunset at the end of this year. We're hoping with the negotiations with the budget for this next year that we actually will have a little more time for this. This is money that is helping these organizations with infrastructure, vehicle, the nutrition programs, especially vehicles, replacing equipment that needs to be replaced, and there's never any money for. And then all the other services have had a big increase, a big chunk of money that came in, essentially one-time only money, that will be sunsetting the end of this calendar year if nothing changes. And then master plan on aging. I don't know if you've heard of the master plan on aging that the governor has put into effect. They've done an update on it from this year, and they have 5 bold goals around how to make life as an older adult better, which helps everyone. It helps all of us. And some funding came through that effort, but also through our association's effort with this, what they call Older Californians Act modernization funding. And unfortunately, it is a limited time of period, and the first 2 years we're already kind of in that part of that first year, but we're receiving about $400,000 to look at volunteer recruitment, aging in place types of activities to help people remain safe at home and safe and happy, secure at home. And then the rest of the money will go for nutrition programs. And that has yet to be rolled out. So that is, again, as some of these other funds sunset, these ones start. So we're not, it's a good thing, but we're not catching a bureaucratic break, as I don't know if a bureaucratic break is actually something that exists, but we don't know where it is. Anyway, our staff have increased because of this. We will have 26 staff. More full-time people than COVID, but our average age of our staff, even though they're younger since pre-COVID, 17 of our staff are over 50, and 5 of those are over 70. We will never be accused of ages discrimination in our workforce. We recently hired a social services staff work up in Del Norte, which is really exciting. It's been a while since we've had anyone up there on the ground who could do information assistance services, so we're happy about that. We've got the area plan coming up. We do a new plan every 4 years. It's coming up, and what's exciting this year is that we are doing this survey. We're working first time that the state, California Department of Aging, has actually said, let's do a survey for the entire state. Rather than all 33 area agencies doing their own thing and asking different questions, we're all going to be using the same survey. And we're going to start being able to compare data over years. So this is, they've already sent it out to thousands of people in the 2-county area. People 55 plus are invited, and we're not really going to be giving out a lot of paper surveys, but unless somebody just has no access to the internet at all. But otherwise, we encourage people to go online and take it. If you're 55 and older, and if anyone has received this survey in the mail already, please fill it out because you were randomly chosen and your randomness is incredibly important to us. So please fill it out. Surveys looking at community quality of life, belonging. Do people know where information is? Are there productive activities that people can participate in? And looking at health and wellness. So it's a pretty extensive survey, but short. It's not overly burdensome. I took it and I passed. So here's our party information. If people would like to come and join us for some cake and a tour and meet our staff in our new location. And I think that's it.
And that's tomorrow.
That is tomorrow.
Well, lovely. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for all the work that everybody at Area 1 does. I know you reached out to me a lot as far as Willow Creek and other stuff in my district, as well as Southern Humboldt, and your efforts at Rio Dell were very admirable. So thank you for all that. Any other input from the board? Supervisor Bushnell.
I just want to say, especially in the Southern Humboldt area with the elderly population down there, a lot of times it's they just don't understand technology or how to access with technology, and you guys are very helpful that way. That was the case also with the Rio Dell residents when a lot of that information was coming and the recovery was coming through access online, so forth and so on. And so I heard that comment often. I don't know how to do that. I don't even email. I don't, and so you guys were there to help with that, and I just appreciate that. I get stumped with technology as well, and muddle through it, but it at times can be very challenging. So I appreciate all those efforts and for you just being here and your advocacy around it.
Well, thank you. And one thing I do want to say is if we can get a volunteer who's willing to teach digital classes in Rio Dell, we have the iPads that we can offer classes there and provide iPads to them and help them get connected. So, but it's a volunteer-based program. So we're looking for recruiting volunteers right now who want to learn we use Senior Planet, which is the framework and the training models, but it's really simple and fun and people really appreciate it. So pretty much everything we do in our organization, we need volunteers to get it to some of the smaller remote locations. So our volunteer driver program, we could be driving people to and from Willow Creek if we had volunteers in Willow Creek willing to do it. So we can have as many services to as many parts of the county as we can have folks who are willing to chip in and help their neighbors.
Well, I didn't know that portion of that you had that available, and so that's great because there is a community service through the chamber in Rio Dell, and they do a lot of classes, and so I will speak with them as well as in Southern Humboldt. There's the Healy Center, which they always are looking for more classes and things, programs for their clientele. So I will speak with Nick as well.
Yeah,
thank you.
Nick is on our board, and he's a great resource for that community, and we like to work with him on projects.
Yeah,
definitely.
Nick's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I learned about a couple of new things that you do that I didn't know about. But I was wondering if you could touch on the relationship between your organization and the Humboldt Senior Resource Center, because I know that sometimes I get them a little muddled, I'll admit, because there's a lot of programs. So could you speak about that a little bit?
Right. So one in a small community where resources are very tight, one of the things we don't do is offer the same type of services. So, I remember people I used to work at the senior center for many years, and I remember people would all say, well, why are there two organizations? And I'm like, no one ever asks that question around children's services. No one ever says, why is there more than one organization serving children? And the fact is we do different things. One of the main things the area agency does is contract and plan, and which, not that all organizations don't plan, but we have these mandates from the federal government to do those things. And some of the money we give, we subcontract out to the senior center. So we do different kinds of programs. They are really in the forefront in not just our area, but really in the country in terms of their PACE program. To have a rural PACE program, it's very difficult, very challenging, and they started that up. As we were starting that, I said, this looks really hard. I'm going to go join the Peace Corps, so I left. But they're doing a tremendous job with that, and a lot of their programs are really focused on health types of their daycare programs, their MSSP program, which does the care management, and then of course the nutrition programs are so critical. So they do a lot of those different things, and we do the things that I've mentioned. The trick is, if you don't know what you need or who to call one or the other of us, because we will get you to the right place. So, but yes, you're allowed to have more than one organization serving older adults, and we have senior centers all around the community. So, it's nice to have those local groups that you don't have to go from Fortuna to Eureka to get something, that you have things in different parts of the county. So what we would love to do is be able to get more of the minimal resources we have into these smaller nooks and crannies. And it's very challenging, like I said, without the volunteer support. Thanks.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And have a good Older Americans Month.
Absolutely. All right, and we have one last item on the agenda, and we should take public comment on this. Yes, thank you, County Council. I don't see any hands up in Zoom. Is there anybody here in the audience that would like to comment on this wonderful annual report?
Yeah.
Please, come on up.
I'm going to be 53 in 6 days. I lived in California all my life. I'm from Orange County, but I lived there 24 years, and I lived in Humboldt maybe over 22 years, and LA and Fresno like 3 years. But I want to stay in Humboldt County. My brother lives here. He's got a boat, and I fished 6 seasons with them. But that was a long time ago, and because of politics, he said I can't fish with them, and I kind of want to do that. But I'm also a musician. I play in the church in Arcata Methodist for 4 years, the past 4 years, praise band, 20 minutes on Sundays. And the point I'm trying to make is it wasn't always like that. I mean, I struggled with social workers and sociology class that I had trouble with, and in between places to live, I had some physical difficulties getting along. And what I'm trying to say is, now that I'm living at Bayview Heights Apartments, I noticed that the people that are in their tents and stuff don't last very long on the street. I mean, even in good weather, they're only there for a couple days. I guess there's an ordinance or a law, but camping or ordinance law, and that's understandable. But I think like since I got hurt, like hit by a couple cars and my head smashed with a coffee cup in the cement. I think that that shouldn't happen to anybody else. And I know I'm not the only one that ever had an injury. I'm not, but homeless is bad enough, I mean, I think that maybe the military should try and help, because we don't know who's coming to our country next. We don't know who's going to end up in Humboldt County from the Haitians and the Ukrainians and the Afghanistans. We don't know how that's going to turn out. And free meal, they struggle just to keep and the weather, you know, we can't really control everything. And I know it's hard, you know, people got to like fill out applications and try and work, and then there's the elderly that are suffering, and all the crime and everything in the world kind of went down the tubes with.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, I don't know what to say, but I mean, I'm just saying, maybe there could be a little bit more, more mercy and compassion on the homeless.
Thank you very much. All right, and seeing no other comments, we'll move to our next agenda item.
Chairman Madrone,
Excuse me.
we would need a motion to receive and
Yes.
file the report.
Thank you very much for keeping track of that.
So
And
moved.
we have a motion by Supervisor Arroyo and a second by Supervisor Bushnell. Can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Madrone. Supervisor Bohn?
Sure.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
And Supervisor Madrone?
As an almost 71-year-old, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0.
All right, and our final item on the agenda, if that's correct, everybody's keeping me on track today. We have item D2, which is the bid authorization for the California Redwood Coast Humboldt County Airport parking lot rehabilitation project, and we have Cody Rogatz, Director of Aviation, here today. Welcome.
Do we know who pulled it? Or does it matter?
Doesn't much matter. Who pulled it?
My office advised Cody that he should pull this. It is a very large dollar project, but it's also coming to your board somewhat expedited, and so we felt like it was important to discuss that and give your board an opportunity to provide feedback.
Transparency is a good thing. All right, great. Please, Director Rogatz.
Thank you, Chair Madrone and Board of Supervisors, for having me here today and pulling item D2 for further discussion and consideration. This item is being brought before you today earlier than originally planned due to matters outside of the county's control. Due to the ongoing negotiations taking place in Washington, D.C., related to the potential raising of the debt limit, the nation's debt limit, and one of the negotiating topics being a potential clawback of past federal funds allocated, including CARES Act funding, we brought this item forth as quickly as possible to try to prevent impacts to your aviation department and projects being funded with CARES Act grants. We were notified by FAA officials last Thursday, May 11th, of a new deadline, which is over a year in advance of our original deadline of June 1st, 2023, to officially commit these funds and attempting them from being clawed back by any actions that may be taken here forward in relation to the debates in Washington, D.C. As such, our county organization quickly pivoted and brought this item before you here today. Admittedly, in doing so earlier than originally anticipated, we expect to have a development addendum related to the specific ADA details on the project. In the interest of full transparency with the board and the public, we will bring an item back to your board on next Tuesday's agenda, identifying design changes in that addendum to the bid package. Design addendums are standard for a project of this scale, so potential bidders will be accustomed to and be expecting this. Bringing addendums back to your board is not something we would typically do in a bid process, but we will again be doing so in the interest of transparency. In following the bid schedule before you here today, we will already be hosting a pre-bid meeting at ACV next Wednesday, May 24th, and we'll be discussing the addendum details with the potential bidders at that time. I would like to thank CAO Hayes and Assistant CAO Clower and the ADA team for all of their assistance in bringing this before you today, the work they've put into assisting our department in pivoting on new and very tight timelines for this project, and ensuring that this particular project addresses as many ADA barriers as possible, and to execute a project that serves all of Humboldt County in improving parking facilities and accessibility to the ACV airport. Be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to, yes, Supervisor Bohn.
Design changes aren't that we're not going to just actually have one access road to the airport like some people have suggested, are we?
No, this won't impact roadways to and from the airport. It will slightly change the exit from the parking lot as far as how people exit and enter the parking lot facilities, but it won't affect roadways at all.
And you know, the design I'm talking about is just having one road come into the airport, both the private hangar and the public hangar, and then using all that road that sucks all around the parking lot as more parking.
Correct. Yeah, it won't impact any general aviation utilization. There is one crossing of a roadway for underground electrical, but that is identified in the bid package set as one overnight day project.
What's your time frame on that? Since the airport's going to be closed for 13 days, would we be able to do a lot of the impacts, the underground, at least put the conduits in and everything else, why we're shut down anyway, and then be able to move forward because it's going to be an impact anyway?
Yeah, great questions. The schedule, so we would be accepting and opening bids on the afternoon of May 31st, at which point we would turn around yet that evening and submit our grant application, our official grant application to the FAA for the funding to do this project. And again, we won't be impacting any of the roadways. There will be some temporary parking outlines throughout the project, but we'll obviously notify the public as we go through those different phases in the current parking lots and make changes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you, and thanks for, bringing this forward. I have heard nothing but when are they going to start working on the parking lot issues? So I'm glad that for whatever reason it's getting moved up quicker.
Yes.
And I know transparency is good, so thank you. Although I did not have one person say, what are you doing with consent and a 4.5 million item? So I think people are just happy to see it move forward.
Oh, thank you, Supervisor Bushnell.
All right, great. Well, we'll go to public comment, and I don't have any hands up in Zoom. There's only one person there. And we'll go back to the audience here. Is anybody here today want to speak specifically to this airport parking lot improvement project? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board for a roll call vote.
Do we need a motion?
Oh, yeah, let's have a motion. That sounds good.
I'll make a motion that...
Older American.
I'll make a motion that we go with staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Moved by Bushnell and seconded by Arroyo. Now can we have a roll call vote, please?
Now we can do that.
Thanks for keeping me on task.
Supervisor Bohn.
Yep.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Yes.
And Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0.
Fantastic. All right.
Thank you all
for being here, and thank you for your continuous pursuit of improvements at the airport. Appreciate it. All right, and with that, we are adjourned. What? Yes, we are adjourning today in the name of the person that we had the wonderful ceremony at the beginning, and that was Richard Evans. So with that, we are adjourned.